All right, hello YouTube. Welcome to episode 27 of Geekery Abides. I am Tad. I will, I guess, of course, do the intro after the intro for the full podcast, of course. But welcome. This is a first, I guess, as I'm bouncing around, trying out different release schedules. I guess I can talk about that more here on the YouTube side because it doesn't matter as much for the podcast folks. It all gets posted on the podcast feed at the same time, Sunday morning. But yeah, I will say we haven't gone through this episode yet, but so far I honestly think this feels better. Yeah, there was a little bit of a break between this and Dark Tower Palaver. It gives me a little bit of time, grab some food, relax for a bit, and do this. So far, this is actually feeling better than Friday, honestly. So see at the end of this episode I'll say for sure, but so far I am feeling like this is maybe the way we're going to continue to do it as the future, as we move into the future here. So that aside though, let's go ahead and hit the intro and get started with episode number 27. Got a lot to talk about. Let's hit it.
He who is ashamed of his geekery has forgotten the face of Stan Lee.
You the proud, the geeky.
This is the podcast, Geekery Abides.
Hello and welcome to Geekery Abides. I am Tad, your humble host, here for episode number 27. Chugging along here into the second quarter century mark. We've been through 25 episodes. We hit that not too long ago, a couple episodes back, but here we are into 27. We're on our way to 30. So welcome. If you're new, if you've been listening, I appreciate it. If you're new, welcome. So this is my geek podcast to talk about all things geekery. Of course, I have the other podcast on the Dark Tower side, which covers Dark Tower and all things Stephen King, and this is for basically everything else. So let's go ahead and dive right in. First of all, want to give out the email address. If you'd like to contact the show, you can do that by sending an email to me at T-A-D-D, at geekeryabides.com. Again, Tad is spelled T-A-D-D, and that is at geekeryabides.com. That is the way to contact the show, to get in touch, feedback, whatever you might have. If you agree with me on something, disagree on something, you got a show idea, whatever it might be, send the emails that direction. If you can't make it live, that is your best way to be part of the show and part of the conversation. So let's go ahead and jump to the next thing, which is, of course, watching, reading, playing. Although I have definitely been thinking that maybe listening should be in there as well. I guess I can fall into reading if you're talking audiobooks, but yeah, I don't know. But for now, watching, reading, playing, it's what we've been doing since day one on this. Just kind of, keep an eye on what we're up to. So for me, I'll knock reading out of the way real quick and just say I have really not read anything recently. I have been, I think I mentioned it last time, I did a tier ranking on the Beatles. I have been obsessively listening to the Beatles for, I don't know, for about a month or maybe almost 2 months now. So, let's see. So yeah, I've been listening to a lot of music, mostly the Beatles, and because of that I haven't really been listening to a lot of audiobooks. So not a lot reading wise. I'm kind of in a lull for that, but I do feel that want to dive back in and finish that history book I had started, and then I can get back into some fiction, which is always fun. In terms of playing, not much change there, just MLB The Show and RoboCop Rogue City. Those have been my vices as of late when it comes to video games. Although I'm always on the lookout for a game to burn a hole in my pocket, whether I play it or not. but shopping for games sometimes is as fun as buying games. Too bad it isn't as cheap as like Netflix or any of these streamers where you just flip through for 25 minutes looking for something to watch and you end up not watching anything. That's cheaper than going and buying a video game that you may never play, but whatever. But then watching wise, been watching a lot. So I did finally finish Seinfeld. I don't think I mentioned the finishing it last time. I think I still had a couple episodes left, but I have finally finished my rewatch of Seinfeld, so that was fun. Put that away. Been watching True Detective Night Country. As a matter of fact, I just watched the 5th episode. It dropped yesterday. But in terms of doing some show prep and just normal stuff, I didn't have time to watch it yesterday. So in fact, I actually watched it while I was grabbing some food between the Dark Tower show and this one. Pretty intense. The second to last episode. A lot of interesting stuff happening. I love it. Loving the show quite a bit. Can't wait for the finale. They bumped it, of course, because I guess tomorrow is the American national holiday, which is the Super Bowl. So of course, if you are a show airing on Sunday afternoons or evenings, that would not be a good day to air your show. So they moved their 5th episode up to Friday instead of Sunday. So glad to have seen that. Can't wait for the finale next week. Very fresh in my mind. But next up, other than that, I've also been watching Masters of the Air, the new Spielberg and Tom Hanks World War II show, the third such show that they've created. They did Band of Brothers in 2001. They did the Pacific, what was that? 2012 is what I've got in my head, but let's see, Pacific miniseries. Let's see what the date is, if I got it right or not. No, 2010. Okay. I knew 2012, like it felt kind of right, but not right at the same time. I didn't have a lot of confidence, so I figured, I wonder if I might be wrong. Yeah, so 2010. So 2001, 2010, and then, of course, 2024 for this third one to start. This one is following American Army Air folks. I guess there was no Air Force, so it was the Army at the time, as they are running bombing missions and stuff over Europe. So it's been a good show so far. There's been a couple different, there's been 4 episodes now. I've loved all of them for sure, but so far episode 3 was certainly the highlight. This week's episode 4 is pretty great. A lot of cool stuff happening, and unexpected stuff happening. Good storytelling going on that show. So okay, so that is Master of the Air. Then I actually, because of my Beatles obsession, I back in the day started is it called Get Back, the Peter Jackson documentary, Peter Jackson Beatles. Get Back. It's a documentary that he remastered in 4K. It's something that was recorded back in the late 60s as they were recording the album Let It Be. Peter Jackson remastered it in 4K. I watched the first episode back when it first came out and then kind of fell off of it there. And with the recent obsession with them, I have went in and watched the rest of that. So there was that. And then the last thing I've got, I have a little bit to talk about on this one. I mentioned it a few episodes back that I was debating on diving into Battlestar Galactica, the 2004 one with I'm just blanking on her name. She plays Bo-Katan. Oh man, she's in one of the Halloween movies. Bo-Katan actor. It is Katie Sackhoff, of course. Fuck. It's the Katie Sackhoff Battlestar Galactica. Sorry, I'm trying to adjust my light here. There we go. So it's the Katie Sackhoff one that came out in 2004. It is, I actually watched not all of the original Battlestar Galactica, but I grew up on it. So there's some stuff that I'm familiar with Battlestar Galactica. I bought this one ages ago. I've had the box set up on my top of my shelf here for probably close to 10 years and have never cracked it. So I decided to finally crack it. I think we covered it either last episode or the episode before, where there's a new Battlestar Galactica that they're potentially looking to do. And I mentioned that had been kind of like, I had it in my mind to dive into that. But I did finally dive in to that. But the funny story on that was, my box set up top, it is I believe it's region free, but it scared me a bit when I first opened it because it has the little like age icons that are generally on like UK releases, so I was kind of worried that it would be not be region free, and I would not be able to watch it on my player. But honestly, with TV shows, I really like not being able to not having to like flip discs in and out. So I went to go rip it on my computer and stuff, and I ended up having the first disc wasn't working, so I actually had to sail the high seas, which I don't feel bad about because I already own the damn thing. I'm literally just, because the disc wouldn't read in my player, all I was doing is downloading that first disc. And when I downloaded that, that included the miniseries. There was 2 miniseries to start out to kick the show off. So I downloaded that. I've ripped the rest off of my discs, have it all on my hard drive because then I could just watch it on the TV. And so the thing I downloaded actually, for some fucking reason, flipped the, or frackin', is that the phrase they're using in Battlestar to fill in for the F-bomb? But somehow they had flipped the 2 miniseries episodes titling wise in the thing. So as I went and jumped in and watched it, little did I know when I was trying to watch the first miniseries episode, there were 2 hour and a half episode things, and it kicked it off, and then it goes into your standard 1 hour show. But I watched the second one first, not knowing that. And honestly, I have to say, it actually kind of worked. Watching the second one, I mean, there was certainly not, I didn't have as much context as you would have had watching the first episode first, but it just felt like something that kind of threw you into the action right away and had you kind of catching up or whatever. And it worked out mostly pretty well. I think there was a couple small things that didn't make as much sense, but I was piecing it together. And then when I went to watch the second episode, it just started with this weird intro that just felt very episode 1-ish. So I went and did the research and realized they had flipped them. So I actually ended up watching the second one first and the first one second. But I will say, interestingly enough, the second one does kind of work as a first one, but you do kind of feel like you're riding by the seat of your pants. It feels quick and relentless. Some big events had already happened. It seemed like it was a show that was beginning right after a big event had happened, where if you actually watched the first episode, you saw the big event, the lead up to, and then the actual big event happened. So it was kind of interesting watching it that way, but I am now on pace and watching it in order, so that's awesome. Hello, Mike. Welcome. So Mike says, watching, spent a lot of time on the treadmill. I'm doing a rewatch of Farscape. That's awesome. I never really watched that one back in the day, but I remember that one existing for sure. There was that, and there was Outer Limits. There was the one called Sliders. There was like all these like sci-fi shows in the late 90s. That was, and even the mid to late 90s, like a lot of good stuff in there. Mike says, reading World War Z, playing instead of new Fallout New Vegas, I started Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, which is an awesome one. I'm still wishing that they would remaster that. That's been a rumor off and on over the years. And I would love to play that one again, especially remastered. I played it like 100 times. That's one of the only RPGs I've ever played too. I always tell people, I don't know if I'm just not smart enough for RPGs, but RPGs have never really done it for me. But Knights of the Old Republic is definitely one of the exceptions there. And then Mike says, still on Terrace. So yeah, that's my least favorite part. Give me a lightsaber and I'm a much happier guy. It's actually funny though, because back when that one came out in like 2000, 2001, somewhere in there, I feel like through most of the 90s, there was a lot of Star Wars video games, but it felt like a lot of Star Wars video games, especially as a console kid and not as much of a PC gamer kid, because I know there was some, but a lot of the console games that we had played for ages for Star Wars were not Jedi one. You were like pilots, or you were a scoundrel, and it felt like Knights of the Old Republic was a really big breath of fresh air, because it actually allowed you to be a Jedi with the Force and lightsabers and stuff like that. Whereas now, I was reflecting on that not too long ago, playing the new Jedi Outcast, or no, that's the old game from the old days. The Jedi Survivor, Jedi Fallen Order. I can never keep track which is which. I'm playing the second one in that series, and as I was playing that, I was reflecting on the fact that remembering that Knights of the Old Republic felt so unique and breath of fresh air at the time, because we weren't playing a lot of Jedi, and nowadays it seems like everything you play is Jedi, and it almost would feel nice to play something where you're just a scoundrel. It's kind of the cyclical nature of it. But yeah, I love Knights of the Old Republic. It is a good one. So let's go ahead and dive on into the news, which there is a lot of news. Mike says Terrace is my least favorite part too. And Terrace is the Raiders of the Lost Ark of Star Wars. You help all those people with the Sith, and then the Sith atomize the whole planet after you leave. Yeah, indeed. It's I mean, I don't know. I remember being a young, high school kid or whatever playing that game and actually being happy that Terrace got blown up just because I hated playing it so much. Which I know that sounds really dark, but I was just so annoyed by like not having a lightsaber that then, especially as I got on and got to where you actually start dealing with like the lightsaber and the Force, it ended up making me retroactively hate Terrace even more because that's what was standing between me and a lightsaber. Good stuff, though. So let's go ahead and dive on into the news. The first one is a sad one. Unfortunately, we just recently had the passing of the legendary and iconic Carl Weathers. He died at 76 years old. He is, of course, an absolute icon across multiple platforms. He was a pro football player. He converted to acting. Of course, probably the most iconically, he is Apollo Creed in the Rocky movies, the first 4 Rocky movies. And even, I was thinking about it not too long ago, right after his death, was in the Rocky movies, as they've rebooted, quote unquote, kind of legacy sequel, probably more than rebooted, the Rocky series. It's been the Creed series, and that is obviously with Michael B. Jordan and stuff. But with that, it just feels so. It almost feels retroactively so befitting that Apollo Creed, which Carl Weathers played, almost is becoming the bigger part of the franchise now, since his son is the one that is carrying on the Rocky legacy. And of course, not to say that Rocky is anything less or whatever, but it's just kind of cool that they end, rather than like redoing a new kid for Rocky and making a young Rocky series, that they did Apollo Creed's kid and had Rocky there with him in the early stages. And Michael B. Jordan's an amazing actor as well, but it's just really cool, and it added a lot. But of course, that's his most iconic role. One of my all-time favorites is Predator, where he plays Dylan. Of course, I can never see or talk to anyone named Dylan without thinking of that line, "Dylan, you son of a bitch." And then, of course, I also have him taken down. He's been in a lot, so ultimately what I'm mentioning here is the stuff that I mostly know him as. I know there's some other stuff that I've just that isn't as big in my realm, but also The Mandalorian more recently in the Star Wars realm. He's been doing a great job as Grief Karga. And then I also is a big fan of Mortal Kombat, the 10th Mortal Kombat game from about a decade ago. He actually did the voice work for I don't think it was the full voice for Jax, but I think there was a skin you could buy or download or whatever for Jax that turned him into basically Jax as though Apollo Creed, or not Apollo Creed, Carl Weathers was playing Jax. I think it was maybe a reference to Dylan from the Predator movies, maybe, but he actually did voice that aspect of Jax, at least in MK10, which is just called Mortal Kombat for some stupid reason. So those are the ones that get me, but I know he also did like at least one Adam Sandler movie. I will admit I've never been the biggest Adam Sandler fan. I don't know. Comedy's the most subjective. Overall, he's just never been as funny to me as some people. I was always more of a Jim Carrey kid. Comedy wise, of course, as I've gotten older in life, I've gotten to appreciate like the Monty Pythons and of course Edgar Wright, stuff like Hot Fuzz, one of my favorite comedies of the last 25 years. But yeah, let's go ahead and give the soundbite to Mr. Carl Weathers.
Good night, sweet prince.
We will definitely miss Mr. Carl Weathers and all the love and thoughts to his family as they obviously cope with not just losing a screen icon like it is for all of us, but an actual loved one, a father, a grandfather, all that kind of stuff. So hearts out to all those folks. Okay, so next up, we are jumping into Star Wars news. Generally what I've been doing recently is if I've got a lot of news from kind of the big things such as Star Wars, DC, and Marvel, I try to bunch them together and do them as a group. So do have a couple Star Wars things. So let's go ahead and dive into that. The first one here is Daisy Ridley sharing what advice J.J. Abrams gave her when she came aboard The Force Awakens, which was what it was eventually called. I don't even know if it was that title yet. In fact, I think when she was cast, she may have even been named Kira, not Rey yet. But she was brought on. She was obviously the youngest actor in the entire movie. I think she was only like 20 years old. I mean, a primary cast. I don't remember if there's any child actors in the movie or not. But she was obviously the youngest, especially the primary. I think she was only 20 years old. So she was pretty young, pretty inexperienced. And then this is the quote that Daisy recently shared, quoting what JJ told her when she was hired on. He said, quote, "Understand the scale. This is not a role in a movie. This is a religion for people. It changes things on a level that is inconceivable." So that's pretty interesting, and I would say that both positive and negative. I think that's true. I think that you could see both like the positive reflections of religion in Star Wars with people, but you could also see the negative reflections of what religion does to people in Star Wars, unfortunately. So that's actually a very apt thing. Then another quote here going on. Let's see. I'm trying to remember if this was her talking or her quoting him again. But it says, when all of the craziness was going on, I was like, I'm good. I'm coping fine. Everything's fine. And I was fine for the most part. But I think what I was really grappling with was it was my normal. But it was not normal to other people. So that was obviously a quote from Daisy. She goes on and says, quote, "My friends and family or any people who see something in a slightly different way than you do, there's this projection of you and you in the world and how it feels to do this and that. And you're like, well, actually, I'm just a human being separate from all of that. It's quite this wrestle of reality and fantasy that's often projected onto you." So I don't think she's necessarily speaking the most clearly on that, but I think what she's trying to discern is, with the weight of what Star Wars is and the fact that she was in it, just wrestling with that idea of where reality begins and the fiction takes over. And it actually reminds me of a wonderful Carrie Fisher quote. And I pulled that up, and this is outside of the context of the article, but I thought it reflected of something I heard Carrie say a long time ago, and it was, quote, "I think I'm Princess Leia, and Princess Leia is me. It's a Mobius strip tease." So of course, Mobius strip being the thing that's like weird, going in multiple directions. It looks like an infinity sign, but it's like all crazy and stuff, but you can't really see where it begins and ends. And of course, Carrie, being the genius that she is, she just added tease to the strip to make it the Mobius strip tease instead of the Mobius strip. And it is a perfect thing, because ultimately what she was trying to convey there is the same thing that Daisy's saying here, is sometimes it is really hard with something as big as Star Wars to really separate the reality of their normal lives from the actual fiction that means so much to people. Okay, so then next up we've got Daisy Ridley again, reflecting on the divisive fan response for episode 9, which is, of course, The Rise of Skywalker. This is another completely separate thing, but I got two things here serendipitously that are her talking about the effect Star Wars had on her. And she says, quote, "It's still upsetting. You don't want people to feel like you're not you've not served the things that they're a fan of." And then she goes on and says, quote, "Ryan's one was so divisive. It really felt like the first one was fairly." And then she stops and goes and then kind of changes and says, "Everyone was responsive in a similar way. And then Ryan's one was super divisive. And then the last one was super divisive." And then she says, to finish up, quote, "It didn't change how I felt about it." So, it's definitely interesting. I think that JJ kind of would have put her in the right headspace of how people react. I think that in general, I would probably give more warning if I were a filmmaker about maybe things like Ahmed Best, Jake Lloyd, George Lucas himself. Rose, the Rose actor, I'm blanking on her name, Rose Tika, from episode 8, which it would have come after, so that wouldn't have helped for or Tico, actor, it is Kelly Marie Tran, and then there's just all these people that have obviously had a lot of horrible parts of their life happen because of the fan reaction to their work in Star Wars. And then Let's see. Mike says he will be missed about Carl Weathers, and then Cubs. I'm not sure. Is that a reference to one of the things I'm not as familiar with? Let's see. Carl Weathers. Um, Chubbs. Okay. Yeah, from Happy Gilmore. I thought so. I've seen that one, and I didn't necessarily hate it. I just saw it a long time ago as a young kid, and just as it evolved with more and more Adam Sandler stuff, I just didn't get around to it. And the other thing that's funny too about growing up in the like the '90s and stuff is sometimes it wasn't even your choice. Sometimes it was just a matter of like what did Blockbuster have in stock, or what of the rare VHS tapes did your parents buy, and that kind of defined what you were a fan of, right? Like it's like I can't even necessarily say that I made a conscious choice to not see a lot of Adam Sandler movies so much as it was what did my parents choose to go to in the theaters or not go to in theaters? What did they choose to buy, because it's crazy. I was thinking about that too as I've kind of just been shopping through video games. Is it's like back in the day, man, it wasn't like you jumped on like the internet and looked at reviews on games before making a choice, because nowadays I do. Like, man, games are expensive, and I'll go through and read as many reviews as I can to get an idea, like, is this game good, is it worth it, what are the ups and downs, what are the highs and lows, whatever, and I do all this homework and research. It's like back in the day it wasn't that way. It's just like what your parents got you for Christmas, and then that would be the games that defined entire consoles for you. And like me, I usually didn't have a shitload of games. I had a handful of games tops for each console, and it's like that's the it's just weird how that works, man. Nowadays kids have it a little bit easier. I mean, yes, they still have to buy games or whatever, but it's like having access to streaming services and all this crazy shit. Like, they just have more access to things than we ever did as kids, until we got older and got jobs and were able to buy shit and stuff, of course. But yeah. And then Mike also said, I wish Carrie Fisher wrote more. I bet she could have been a modern day Samuel Clemens. Yeah, yeah, I think there's a lot of really cool interviews that she's done over the years that you can find some cool stuff. But yeah, I agree. I wish she would have written more. And especially, I mean, even in the screenwriting side, she did a lot of script doctoring. So it's funny that she did a lot of creative writing in Hollywood that she would never ever be credited for, which is kind of a shame, because I think that from what I've heard, she was quite talented at that. But in a job like script doctoring is a lot like ghostwriting. You end up not getting any credit for it. So, but I agree. I think if she would have written a couple, books, like George Carlin is another one that wrote a lot of books, and they were pretty awesome books, cool ways to get a slice of his mind. I think she would have been awesome doing that for sure. And Mike says, I was in college for Happy Gilmore, perfect timing. Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of, I think the difference is it's just like, I don't remember the dates on those, but it's like, I feel like, yeah, just a lot of Adam Sandler. I think the only one I remember is in the DVD days I ended up getting the one with Jack Nicholson, with Adam Sandler, Jack Nicholson. And then I think on VHS, I think we actually had, what's the one where he gets the kid that's not really his? Those are like the only ones I'm really familiar with. And then like Happy Gilmore and Billy Madison, I remember like maybe seeing with like at friends' houses and stuff when I was really young, but I saw those like once or whatever. So yeah, Anger Management, that's the one. I did own that one on, I think I own that one on DVD. And then the one with where it's like his buddy's kid, and his buddy's out of the country, so he pretends to be the dad and takes the kid or whatever. So I do think we had that one on VHS, and I did watch that quite a bit. So I'm not like anti Adam Sandler. It's just I had like the Ace Ventura movies, The Mask, all these like Jim Carrey movies. I don't know if my parents were into him or if it was just whatever, but I definitely had way more exposure to him. It's also that way with action movies, like growing up and then getting older and meeting Peter in like high school and stuff, is like he grew up as like a fan of like the Lethal Weapons and the Die Hards and stuff, and it's like me, I was more of the Arnold kid. I grew up with like your Predator, Terminator, Commando, like all those. I never really saw Die Hards and Lethal Weapons until I was, in high school or beyond. So it's just funny how all that works, because, back in the day it was very random. It was all a matter of what did your parents buy, is pretty much what you had access to. So yeah, that is that. So let's go ahead and hit the next one. And this one is The Mandalorian and Grogu is most likely going to be the next movie coming out for Star Wars. This, I am putting this down as a rumor, although it is 100% confirmed that will begin filming in mid-June. So basically it's starting filming in June. And the only reason I'm putting it down as rumor is the rumor part is that it'll be the first one to come out, because the thing to remember is Disney actually currently has 2 dates on the calendar for Star Wars in 2026. Which I know that sucks. That's 2 years from now. But we have May 22nd, 2026, which is the traditional Lucas late May weekend for Star Wars. I think Solo was the only one in the modern Disney era that came out in May around Memorial Day. That's what I always call Star Wars Day is late May. That Memorial Day weekend, like that's to me what Star Wars is. That's when all the prequels came out. That's when the original trilogy came out. Disney obviously changed things up to December because that is the other date they have. They also have December 18th, 2026. So we've got a late May and a mid-December right before Christmas. There are 2 dates right now that have a Star Wars calendar or flags planted on the calendar. So the question becomes, the Rey movie is most likely the other one that's supposed to be going into production this year. So the question would become is, if they both begin filming this year, one of them will fill the May role, one of them will fill the December role. That's an interesting thing because I remember, what was it? It was Solo. Solo only had a 6-month window between it and the previous movie, I think. I think it came out in May, and I think the previous December was another Star Wars movie. So there's a lot of people that feel like Solo kind of got the hose because it didn't have a lot of time for marketing and to breathe, and everyone was so used to the December releases at that point that it just kind of felt random. So I really hope Disney has a plan here, because this will be another one where May and then December, that is a very short window. But with the starvation we've had for Star Wars content, I do wonder if this will not have as big of an issue as we did back in, was that 2017, 2018? I don't remember when Solo came out. I am fucking blanking. Solo movie. Star Wars story, 2018. So it was 2017, The Last Jedi, and then 2018 came out like 6 months later in May of 2018. So that was the closest smushed together that Star Wars movies have ever been. 2026, it appears, unless some kind of delays happen, we will be getting 2 Star Wars movies in 2026, one in May, one in December. No idea, but the rumor is that Mandalorian and Grogu will be the first one out of the gate. We will see on that one. Mike says crossover between Mando movie and Rey movie. Grogu is talking now. And he says, talking Grogu is, now, I will say, I do kind of hope that at some point Grogu pans out into the more New Jedi Order era of Rey. I think that would be amazing. I do believe, though, that Grogu will not talk backwards like Yoda. This goes back to being a super nerd, and back in the day, Lucas, at one point in an interview back in like the prequel era days, said that Yoda doesn't talk that way as a species thing, but that it's kind of Yoda's 900 years old, and it's kind of I think the equation he made was it would be like somebody speaking like Shakespearean English in the modern day. It's not because they have to speak that way; it's because they're choosing to speak that way. And I think at some point they may have even added into the idea that it's kind of a tribute to a previous, maybe his master back in the day or something. And in fact, that has very recently been confirmed that it's not a species thing, because the Tales of the Jedi episode with Count Dooku has Yaddle, which is the other Yoda one that was in episode 1. We see Yaddle there facing off with Dooku as he turns to the dark side, and Yaddle speaks very normally. So I do believe that Grogu is actually going to talk normal and not Yodish. With all the jumbled speech patterns. So that's my theory, but I do believe that tracks with the canon, that he isn't forced to talk that way, but he does have to start talking. I actually think that the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, he needs to start talking, because in my mind too, because it's like Yoda in Return of the Jedi says, for 800 years I've trained Jedi, my own counsel will I keep on who is to be trained. He's 900 years old. That means that within his 100-year lifespan of his first period of his life, he went from being a baby and being born to teaching Jedi, which means he would have been a Jedi master. And for Grogu, a lot of people are losing track of the fact that the first episode of Mandalorian, they said the target was 50 years old. So Grogu is half the age that Yoda would have been a Jedi master in. So I do think that they need to quit letting him be a fucking baby because he's 50 years old now. It's time to start seeing him talk and evolve because he can't be a baby forever as much as Disney may want him to be. Let's see. Mike says, "Will it include Frank Oz?" Will what include Frank Oz? In terms of like, will he voice Grogu? I hope not. Almost just because like. I would hope that Grogu can be like a staple in things, and I just don't know how long Frank is going to be acting. I mean, I don't know if he is. I don't know if he's talking about retirement or whatever. But I couldn't imagine he's not a spring chicken. So he may even already be retired. I don't know. I don't track Frank, but it's funny because God, there was someone else that or was it Yoda? There was someone in the original trilogy. No, I'm sorry, I'm thinking Darth Vader, because they were actually talking about Orson Welles to voice Vader at one point, and I've always thought that it's very lucky and serendipitous that it wasn't Orson Welles, because he obviously passed away so early that he wouldn't have done half the stuff that James Earl Jones was able to do for Vader. And of course, Orson Welles has a very iconic voice, and Lucas wanted a voice that wasn't as known. And at the time, James Earl Jones' voice wasn't known. Of course, now it's one of the most iconic voices in film history, but at the time it wasn't. So so most likely we'll be seeing Grogu and the Mandalorian and Grogu, as well as the Rey movie in 2026. There's 2 release dates there. So let's go ahead and jump to the next one here. And it is Dave Filoni talking about the Mandalorian movie. I was kind of hoping that we may get some clarity, because the big question that still is outstanding right now is, does the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, is that replacing season 4 of The Mandalorian, or are both going to continue to exist? And I believe Dave was asked this, but he masterfully avoids the question. But it is still interesting to see his response. He was asked, he talked to EW, Entertainment Weekly, at the Saturn Awards. And this is his quote. He says, quote, "There's so much spinning in the galaxy right now. You know me, better than to commit to any one thing. No mind tricks work on me. I'm excited about what we're doing right now. I think it's going to be great. Obviously, with John at the helm, it's going to be fantastic. He's so well studied in Star Wars, so he's got a great shorthand, and I love collaborating with him. Just excited to share the future of what we're doing." So no real answer there in terms of my theory is that season 4 is dead. I do think this all ties back to Bob Iger returning to Disney and basically telling both Marvel and Star Wars and even Disney that we are not a streaming company. We may have a streaming platform, but our business model is not making streaming content. It is to make movies and make a lot of money in the movie theaters. And I think that part of that is I believe that Mandalorian and Grogu is actually season 4 chopped up and made into a movie rather than into a television series. That's my theory, though. But I don't think that's entirely encompassing, because we know that Ahsoka season 2 is coming. So I think some TV will still continue to exist, but I do think that there's some big stuff that is going to be moved to movies. I also think that Mandalorian and Grogu are some of the most successful things of the Disney era in terms of fan and critical reception. So I think that transforming that into a movie to help restart the Star Wars film wing, which has been dead since 2019, I think that's a very good strategy. So we'll see how that all pans out. Next up, Ewan McGregor needs our help. He was at a convention, and I have a quote from him here. He says, quote, "It was originally going to be a movie talking about the Obi-Wan show, and I've often thought, should it have been a movie? But I kind of think it was great that they did it that way, and it was a longer story, and hopefully it's more satisfying as a result. We got more time to weave a story. Let's hope they do another one. Can everyone write Disney? I'll give you some email addresses at the end and just say, Dear Disney, let's have a bit more Obi-Wan Kenobi, please." So yeah, let's do that. Let's throw some shit out there on social media. Of course, I don't think he actually gave any email addresses out, but I do think that we should try to move the needle as much as possible for demanding an Obi-Wan Kenobi further movie or a show, whatever. To see Ewan in that role again would be an absolute joy. So I would love to see it. Disney, make it so. Next up, we've got Star Wars Outlaws. Speaking of video games, as a matter of fact, and this is a video game that you will probably not be a Jedi, but more of a scoundrel blaster pilot type, I believe. So Star Wars Outlaws apparently is releasing this year. The much hyped open world Star Wars game was confirmed to be coming out this calendar year, 2024, in an earnings call with Ubisoft recently. No solid date was given, but they said before the year is over. This game takes place between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. It is a single player, third person action adventure game. So there's been a lot of hype about the open world aspect, which largely has never happened in Star Wars. Of course, there's things like Knights of the Old Republic and stuff that felt a little bit more open world, but of course it was fairly limited in 2001. So this one sounds like it could be really cool. It's obviously a perfect time period right there in the heart of the Galactic Civil War. It sounds like a great time to have a video game. I cannot wait to play it. Of course, I am not going to hold my breath for anything short of a Christmas release, because that seems like that's the way video games work. When they're like, we're going to come out this year, it ends up coming out like the last day of the year. But hopefully it is coming out this year and there is no delays, because that's also very common in video games. I would love to see that game come out, though. I love Star Wars games. They're fun. Next up, we're getting out of the Star Wars realm here and talking The Last of Us. The Last of Us Season 2 has announced the new directors. There are a couple directors returning from the first season, but the new directors for Season 2 that are coming aboard that have not been part of Last of Us up to this point. The first one is Mark Mylod, who just won an Emmy for his directing on the show Succession. He has a pretty illustrious career outside of that. I believe he did some Game of Thrones. He's been a director for HBO for a long time, so he's done a lot of shit. But most recently, he's credited with Succession, where he won an Emmy for that. Nina Lopez Corrado, which was on the new Perry Mason show. Directing wise, Stephen Williams directed Watchmen, the wonderful HBO series, and then Kate Herron, which was a director on the Loki show. Those are the added directors in the Last of Us Season 2. That is one, and I actually have one more Last of Us one, and this one is the most exciting for me. That is The Last of Us has added the goddess Catherine O'Hara to the cast for Season 2. They are, I believe, there's been some rumors about who she's playing, but officially there's been no release as to who she's playing. Even the rumors I've heard, though, give a name, but then say that the name is not someone that's actually in the Last of Us 2 video game. So there is, even if we had a name and it was confirmed, which it's not, it's just a lot of rumors I'm seeing, it would tell us nothing. All I know, though, is everyone that we saw guest star wise for the most part in The Last of Us Season 1 ended up being some pretty heinous and terrible people. So I really wonder what the wonderful Catherine O'Hara is going to be playing. Of course, she's famous for Beetlejuice. She was the mom in Home Alone. She was in Schitt's Creek, wonderful in that. And then she's in the new Beetlejuice, coming out later this year, as a matter of fact. So she's a wonderful actor, very talented, so I can only imagine her that has generally always played comedic roles. I can't wait to see what she'll be doing in The Last of Us. I hope that she is not some evil, fascist, cannibalistic person or whatever. Hopefully she could be someone that's actually good, but maybe seeing her play a little bit more of a dramatic role would be very interesting to see for sure. Next up, Sony has landed Danny Boyle's 28 Years Later movie. Last time we talked about that is basically been announced. Danny Boyle's returning. It's the writer director. Everyone's coming back. And now I think last time we talked about it, they were bidding on the movie. Nobody knew which studio had landed. I think we even talked about Warner Brothers being in the lead to land it, but it looks like Sony ended up winning out. They will be the studio behind it, as well as Cillian Murphy is confirmed to return. That is huge. I know, of course, that is one of the earlier movies in his career. But Mr. Cillian, of course, is potentially potentially leading up to winning an Oscar here in the next little bit. He is, I think, a strong leader in the clubhouse for potentially winning the Best Actor Academy Award for his turn in Oppenheimer. So big credit to him. If he, I mean, of course, we don't know if he's going to win the Oscar yet, but he's obviously a big time actor. So for him to return to 28 years later is wonderful, or to the 28 film franchise is wonderful, and I give him a lot of credit for it. He also did a great job in the second Quiet Place movie too, so he's not averse, even in his more later career, to horror movies. I know some people, especially back in the day, would start their career in horror movies and they would never come back to it. Of course, we have people like I almost said Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis, that kept pretty loyal to her roots, where other ones didn't. And I do believe that he has never been averse to genre stuff. But cool to see him potentially coming back. Mike says, I'm excited for this. I love the fast infected genre. Yeah, me too. I actually have not seen the second one, so I do need to actually, I think I need to buy it too. I think I only own the first one. But I do need to jump in and watch the second one as well. And I'm looking forward to this because I really enjoyed the first movie quite a bit. So yeah, can't wait for that. And then you could see how this is an easy jump off point to the next bit of news, which is they have announced there is an Evil Dead spin-off film in development. So let's go. Infected, Last of Us, which is infected, 28 years later, which is infected, and now we're going to full on zombies or deadites, I guess. This is not, no word on if this has got Bruce Campbell involved. But this is being directed by Sebastian Vanek, which he is, he's done some, pretty, good, horror movies that are a little bit more like under the radar stuff, but he's got a reputation out there as a pretty good horror director, and they're calling it a spinoff. So I don't know if that just means it's independent from the other stuff that's been coming out, but more Evil Dead movies makes me happy. So yeah, I can't wait for that. Next up, we've got Mads Mikkelsen teasing the Hannibal season 4. So Hannibal, of course, has 3 illustrious seasons. Season 4, it was canceled before it hit season 4, and season 4 was allegedly going to be the adaptation of Silence of the Lambs, with Mads Mikkelsen in the role of Hannibal Lecter. So he was talking about a revival with Brian Fuller, and he said, quote, "It's no secret that all of us who are part of the cast and Brian, we all want to go back. It's got to happen eventually, sooner than later, because we're not getting any younger, right?" And then he goes, there's another quote that the article pulled in that was, I think, from a different time, but it's still illuminating. He says, "I don't think it's a secret that if it does happen, it would be, we would love to go into Silence of the Lambs. That's always been an issue because we didn't have the film right, or we didn't have the rights for that book. That's obviously the most famous part, and we love to go there, we'd love to go in there. This is probably if I had the resurrection button that I can resurrect any one thing. There's obviously a lot of potential out there, but Hannibal would be my choice without even questioning it for a second, because this show was incredible, and I just would love to see more of it. I mean, if you want to go season 4 and then do the Silence of the Lambs, in my mind, then you go season 5 and do the Hannibal book. It just seems like there's a lot of cool stuff to do. I love the Hannibal Lecter character and I love those books, and would love to see more from that amazing series. And my favorite book of the series is Red Dragon, and I actually have not watched the 3rd season of Hannibal because there's this finality to it in my mind where it's like, once I watch it, even though it's covering my favorite book, I just refuse to watch it because once I watch it, it's completely over. As of right now, it's still at least floating out there as an unwatched Hannibal thing. I know that sounds like twisted and sick a little bit, but yeah, there's just part of me that's like, the second I watch it and finish it, that's the end. Like, Hannibal's over then. So it's a weird thing. So once somebody picks up and signs season 4, I'd be most happy to dive in, watch, probably rewatch the first 2 seasons as well, then watch the 3rd season, and then wait the 4th season. But Mads is talking like that is still something that people involved are still interested in doing. So next up, we've got Brad Pitt is starring in Tarantino's swan song called The Movie Critic. The rumors are that Brad is actually playing the titular character, so he might be the movie critic. So yeah, I think he's done 3. This will be his 3rd movie, I think, with Tarantino. So yeah, that is pretty cool, but not entirely unexpected. Next up, we've got they're remaking and they are doing a remake, and it is R-rated movie for Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. I'm pretty excited for this. I didn't know this remake was in the works, let alone that now they're announcing that it will be an R-rated remake. This is one I remember renting a couple times as a kid, the original one. It was a fun movie, so I think doing an R-rated remake in the modern day, this is the kind of stuff I'd love to see remakes of more, is stuff that's like almost forgotten versus ones where it's like, oh, Jason or Freddy or some of these other things. Like, quit remaking the shit that's like super iconic and has a shitload of sequels. Find some of the lost gems in history and remake some of those. In my mind, that would be pretty cool. So that, looking forward to that. Next up, Cobra Kai Season 6 has begun production. That is the final season as well of Cobra Kai, so I've been digging the hell out of that show, and I cannot wait to see what they have in store for us come Season 6 of Cobra Kai. I don't know when the release date is on it yet, but it has begun filming. They put out a little teaser video where they show the cast on set and stuff, and it's pretty cool. So that's awesome. Can't wait to give that a watch. Next up, jumping into the DC realm now, Millie Alcock has now officially been confirmed that she is the DCU's Supergirl. Very stoked for her. She was most famous, put on the map by the House of the Dragon show. She played I think Rhaenyra is her name, but she played the younger version. In my mind, I loved the House of the Dragon a lot, but I think the biggest heartbreak for me was when they did the huge time jump, and Millie Alcock was no longer playing Rhaenyra, because I thought she was doing such a wonderful job that it felt like a damn shame to lose her, even though the adult actor is doing a wonderful job as well. But Millie was incredible, and I cannot wait to see her as Supergirl, which we talked about in a previous episode. They're playing up a little bit more of a darker Supergirl. She is going to be one that was a little bit older when Krypton went down, and she will have basically seen everyone she knows dies and been conscious of it, and will probably have a little bit more of an attitude than every version we've seen previous. The article also says that she will be in other films before she gets her own movie, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. No indication on what movies those might be, but of course, the Superman movie is probably the most likely. James Gunn has a quote. He says, "Millie is fantastic, is a fantastically talented young actor. I'm incredibly excited about her being part of the DCU. Yes, I first became aware of her in House of the Dragon, but I was blown away by her varied auditions and screen tests for Supergirl. She embodies Kara as envisioned by Tom King and Anna Nogueira." James Gunn said on social media, quote, "In case you missed the exciting news yesterday, strangely, Millie was the first person I brought up to Peter Safran for the role well over a year ago. When I had only read the comics, I was watching House of the Dragon and thought she might have the edge, grace, and authenticity we needed for the DCU Supergirl. And now here we are. Life is wild sometimes." So pretty excited about this. We covered it in a previous episode where she was one of 3 people that were rumored to be in the final 3 for the role. But it does look like indeed she got the role. So congrats to her. Can't wait to see what she has in store for Kara. Next up, Warner Brothers purchases the rights to the Sundance Superman, and it's not really a Superman documentary. It's actually a Christopher Reeve documentary, and it is called Super/Man, and then : the Christopher Reeve story. This has been a pretty big one here at Sundance. I was pretty bummed that I didn't plan ahead and actually get Sundance tickets. As a Utah native, only going as a huge movie fan too, I've only gone to Sundance once, and that's an absolute shame to me, because I obviously don't have to travel or anything for it. So I need to get on that more. But when I saw that was debuting here at Sundance, I was pretty bummed that I wasn't gonna go get tickets for that. But then I have a quote from James Gunn. He says, I saw the stunningly beautiful documentary Super/Man, the Christopher Reeve story, a couple weeks ago. It emotionally floored me. Peter and I knew DC Studios needed to be involved, and I'm grateful to Peter and our WBD, which is Warner Brothers Discovery now, family at Warner Brothers, HBO, CNN, and Max, having worked so hard to acquire it. It's a wonderful film by a wonderful filmmaker, not only for people like me who love Reeves' work, but for everyone. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing this. I'm hoping with them getting it that it'll either get a wide theatrical release, which I know is rare for a documentary, or it will be on one of their streaming services, which would be absolutely incredible as well. Next up, we have a the first screen image of Colin Farrell's Penguin in the HBO Max series The Penguin. I am loving this. It looks like they were just shooting on a street and someone may have got an image snapped. When you zoom in and stuff, he's wearing kind of the, like the vest with the coat over it. This is very, very, very Penguin to me. Although I will say I still don't believe that's Colin Farrell. I believe that is some sort of black magic. There's no way that is the Colin Farrell that we all know and love. It just, makeup's a wonderful thing, man. But even with like Churchill in The Darkest Hour, there's still every once in a great while you looked and you kind of saw Gary Oldman coming through all that. And he's a chameleon, for God's sake. This, I'm just like, I don't see how that's the same human being that I've seen in so many movies. So, but that's pretty cool. It's cool to see some of what we're going to be seeing on HBO Max here pretty soon with the Penguin series. Next up, we have Kevin Conroy. Everyone's been assuming that his final Batman performance was in the Suicide Squad video game that's out right now. I think it's Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League or something like that. But in fact, that is not the case. He allegedly, or not allegedly, he has indeed recorded 2 final performances before he passed away. His final performances as Batman, and they are both coming soon. First is the upcoming film Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths, where he plays the Batman, the animated series version of the character. Obviously, the Crisis on Infinite Earths is a multiverse thing, so you're going to see multiple versions of Batman. But indeed, the animated series Batman will be involved there, and Kevin Conroy did voice the part, so that's wonderful. And then second, and probably his final performance, as this is probably going to come out after, will be the Batman, or it is just called Batman Caped Crusader animated series, which is coming to Prime Video. I don't know, with that being a series, how much of it he voiced. Or what, if I don't know if that's like he's the primary Batman, I don't know, but those are both in the can voice wise, so we will be getting a couple more performances from the late Kevin Conroy, probably the most iconic Batman, certainly the most iconic Batman voice actor of all time, but it could be argued by Batman fans, and I know Peter would argue it, that he is one of the best Batmans of all time, period, not just animated. So we shall see, and look forward to seeing those as they come out over the next year or so. Next up, we've got my boy Michael Shannon is going to be playing Garfield, but that's the president, not the cat. This is a Netflix series titled Death by Lightning. It is co-starring Matthew McFadden, which is famous. He's become way more famous recently because of his turn in Succession. And this movie is focusing on Garfield's assassination. Shannon is playing Garfield, and McFadden is playing his killer. So that is going to be pretty awesome. I can tell just by that. But also, man, if you're not a history fan, just go read the fucking Wikipedia page for Garfield, man. He is one of the most interesting dudes. I think he's one of the only United States presidents in history that was born into poverty, and made his way all the way up to being the president of the United States. So very fascinating dude, and there's a lot of really cool shit. He's kind of one of those Forrest Gump type presidents that has a lot of really cool stuff in his story. This is going to be focused on his assassination, which is also insane. In fact, his assassination, it's not an instantaneous thing like John F. Kennedy, but he was probably killed more so by the attempted treatments of his gunshot wound than the gunshot wound itself. And in fact, another interesting thing is involved in his treatment was Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor, alleged inventor of the telephone. I know there's one other guy they always say invented the telephone before him, but it's just a fascinating thing that you're going to rope in a guy like that as well. I believe he was trying to invent something to help them locate the bullet in his body. So there's just a lot of really crazy shit. This could be a really interesting movie. But my boy Michael Shannon, whatever he's in, I am interested, and him playing a more obscure president in U.S. history, that should be a lot of fun. Next up, Affleck and Damon are teaming up for another movie. This one, they're doing it for Netflix. It's titled Animals. No details about it other than it revolves around a kidnapping. Next up, this is a big one that just broke a few days ago. Predator is getting a new film. This is a standalone film by Dan Trachtenberg. It is titled Badlands, and it is being called a standalone film. There is still a Prey sequel in the works as well, but it does sound like finally, I've been saying it for decades now, that it is a crying shame that the Predator doesn't have as many movies as Alien. Because I think Predator is just as fascinating, if not more so, than Alien, the Alien franchise. But it just seems like Predator has always been a little bit shafted on sequels and whatever. So I can't wait to see this. Can't wait for more Predator movies. Have no idea anything about it because it was just barely announced. But it should be a lot of fun. We'll look forward to it for sure. Next up, Ryan Johnson is allegedly going to begin filming on Knives Out 3 later this year, which hopefully means it'll be released sometime in 2025. Yeah, I'm excited. I loved Knives Out 1. I loved Glass Onion. Benoit Blanc is a wonderful character. And I've always loved Ryan Johnson. I love, Brick, Looper, just so many of his movies are just incredible. And yeah, Knives Out is no exception. So I can't wait to see Knives Out 3. And I don't know what he's going to do for casting, man. He's used up so many great actors in the first two. I don't know how he's going to keep filling out, these all-star wonderful casts. I keep thinking to myself like dream casting ideas. And then every time I pick one, I had to think about it for a second. I realized like, oh fuck no, that actor was in the first one or that actor was in the second one. He's used up a lot of really great actors. I'm sure he'll find more, but I do think Joseph Gordon-Levitt needs to be involved because Ryan Johnson's one of the first people that really gave Joseph Gordon-Levitt some love in the film world and helped him transition from being the child actor that did television stuff into being a movie star. And I would love to see him play a bigger role in Knives Out other than just doing the dong sound in the second movie. But he did a wonderful job too in Poker Face, which is a great show that Ryan Johnson did. I can't wait for the second season of that. I think it was the final episode of the first season. Joseph Gordon-Levitt played an amazing role, and it was really cool to see him there. Next up, we've got Carl Urban talking about Mortal Kombat 2, which just wrapped filming, is what I meant to say. So MK2 just wrapped, and Urban posted a thing on social media. It's just a picture of him. I didn't want to share it because he's not in costume or anything, but he is playing Johnny Cage, and he said, quote, "That's a wrap for me and Johnny Cage on Mortal Kombat 2. Massive thanks to our incredible crew, cast, and phenomenal stunt team. Hands down the most action-packed fun I've ever had on a film. Can't wait for y'all to see it. Special thanks to everyone Offset who helped make this time here on the Gold Coast, Australia, such a pleasure." So of course I'm a huge Mortal Kombat fan, so I'm excited to not only for the movie, but to see Carl Urban's turn as Johnny Cage. I remember, getting to know Carl Urban in the Lord of the Rings movies. And then after that, there was the first couple movies he did after that where I'm like, there's no way he could do that. He's just this big beefy dude from Lord of the Rings. He's not going to be able to do like Bones McCoy in the Star Trek movies. But then every single time he's proven me wrong to the point where I don't doubt the man anymore. The man can do anything and everything. So can't wait to see him play Johnny Cage in Mortal Kombat 2. Next up, Denzel Washington and Spike Lee are teaming back up, and they're going to be remaking the movie High and Low. And that is so Denzel and Spike are reuniting. This will be their fifth film together. It is being made for A24 and Apple, and it is a remake of Akira Kurosawa's High and Low. And I actually own this one, but to my shame, I have not watched it yet. But the synopsis for it is, quote, "An executive of a Yokohama shoe company becomes a victim of extortion when his chauffeur's son is kidnapped by mistake and held for ransom." So, of course, Akira Kurosawa is a man that has no stranger to American filmmakers remaking or revamping his work, whether it be his samurai films being turned into westerns, whether it be a lot of influence on Star Wars, all kinds of stuff. So it'll be kind of cool to see what, a remake or a remake of one of his I think most of his most iconic stuff is usually samurai stuff. So kind of one of his more modern set movies. It'll be interesting to see a remake of that. I mean, modern for the time, not, 15th century Japan. So yeah, looking forward to that. So next up, we've got Marvel. Marvel news. Let's go ahead and dive on into Marvel. So the first one is a rumor, and it is Marvel is developing a female-led Iron Fist project. Not a lot on this, other than it could be an animated film. I honestly don't think very highly of Iron Fist because that was the only of the Netflix things that I absolutely could not stand. It just did not do it for me. So I'm kind of poisoned a little bit on the Iron Fist in general. But I mean, yeah, we'll see what happens here now that it's maybe under the more MCU realm of people rather than whoever was involved with the Netflix show. We'll see. I'll check it out maybe. The next one is a big one, and it is Bill Pullman is being cast in as the Sentry for Thunderbolts. Lewis Pullman, he has done. He was in the newest Top Gun movie, as well as he is in the absolutely wonderful the Bad Times at the El Royale. He plays the counter dude that at the end is giving his confession to a priest that is not actually a priest. He did a wonderful job in that. He did a wonderful job in Top Gun. So yeah, I can't wait to see him here. Some interesting points to point out here though is the Sentry. This is one of the most powerful characters in the history of comic books. He took a serum that gave him the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns. He can control his molecules and basically give him any power he wants. But the catch is that he has an entity called the Void, which is a malevolent entity that attempts to answer every positive thing that the Sentry does with an act of evil. So there's always this constant struggle for him to keep the Void in check. Otherwise, and I do believe the Void is one of the most powerful evil forces in the comic book realm as well. So that's pretty cool. Pretty cool character, and adding it to Thunderbolts, and casting an absolutely wonderful actor. Can't wait to see how that pans out. Next up, we've got Bob Iger saying that the MCU and Marvel has lost focus, and that is his words. He said recently that not only Marvel, but Disney Studios in general has lost focus. He says, quote, I'd say we're leaning a little bit more into sequels and franchises. I think given the environment and given what it takes to get people out of their homes to see a film, leaning on franchises that are familiar is actually a smart thing. In our zeal to greatly increase volume, partially tied to this wanting to chase more global subs for our streaming platforms, some of our studios lost a little focus. So the first step that we've taken is that we're reducing volume. We reduced output, particularly in Marvel. So that is the one that he called out more directly. And then another quote from Mr. Iger, quote, looking to our 2025 theatrical slate, we're excited to bring audiences Captain America, Brave New World, and the Fantastic Four for Marvel. Pixar has Utopia 2, and there's Avatar 3. And we're looking forward to 2026 and beyond with Frozen 3, the first Toy Story movie since 2019, and then a new Star Wars movie that brings Mandalorian and Grogu to the big screen for the very first time. The thing from that last quote that people are actually pointing out is the aforementioned Thunderbolts and Blade were not mentioned. So people are kind of wondering, does that mean that these movies are delayed or are they removed from the schedule entirely? The only thing I'd point out, though, is he did only mention the Mandalorian and Grogu. So we already talked earlier about the fact there's 2 Star Wars dates in 2026. So I don't necessarily think that he's giving the entire rundown. So his not mentioning Thunderbolts or Blade, I don't know that means that they're not happening, as some people are freaking out about. Next up, and this is a comic book thing, not a TV or series thing, but Marvel Comics is doing a What If series for the James Cameron classic Aliens. The What If comic is going to be exploring basically the question is, what if Carter Burke survived? Of course, Mr. Burke is one of the most vile and reprehensible characters in the history of television or movies. He is a dastardly motherfucker that died in probably one of the most cheered deaths out there. To this day, the talented Paul Reiser, I cannot trust him in anything he does because of his turn as Burke in Aliens. Whenever I see him in anything, I always just watch him with suspicion because Burke was such a piece of shit that I'm suspicious that any character that he plays in anything is also a piece of shit. So, of course, no one ever in the history of anywhere ever wanted to see Burke live, but it will be interesting to see because most likely he will be a very shamed person if he was to survive that. So we'll see what that looks like. That's kind of a cool idea, though, is a comic book on what if Burke survived Aliens. Next up, we've got Deadpool 3. We got a synopsis for Deadpool 3. Also, I already mentioned earlier that tomorrow is the big game, the Super Bowl. I am not under any copyright thing, so I can say Super Bowl, which is funny because if you didn't know that, the term Super Bowl is actually trademarked. That's why when you see, stores advertising snacks or whatever, they always say big game, because they have to pay to say the words Super Bowl. So from now on, that'll ruin advertising for you forever, because now every Super Bowl thing you see, you'll now start to notice the fact that they never say the term Super Bowl unless they have paid for their licensing for that. But I'm going to mention that, we'll mention it in a bit, but Super Bowl's coming up. That has some relevance on Deadpool 3 as well. So the synopsis is, quote, "That fucking irresponsible hero Deadpool will change the history of the MCU with Wolverine." Yeah. So, or actually, let me see. That fucking irresponsible hero Deadpool will change the history of the MCU with Wolverine. I guess it's a question. I feel like they got it backwards. They have an exclamation point, then a question mark. I feel like it should be question mark, then an exclamation point, isn't it? I thought that's how it worked. But either way, it sounds like it's more questiony. So that is the synopsis. We have a quote from Sean Levy, the creator behind it. He says, "I'm going to say this, fuckload more than you think. I'm so wary, but one thing Ryan and I were really united in was wanting to make Deadpool 3 very much consistent and continuous with the franchise's DNA, but to see where we could evolve with a third movie." And he says, quote, "Once we knew we were where we knew that it was going to be Wolverine Deadpool movie, oh my God, what a gift to a storyteller, because not only do you have two iconic actors playing their most iconic roles, but you have two characters whose dynamic is already famously fraught. And anytime you're dealing with characters who start from a place of deep dislike and conflict and differences from each other, the mouth Deadpool and the surly, laconic man, a few words Wolverine. What a great formula for storytelling. And ultimately, the movie does have more character depth and heart than I think anyone will be expecting. So that is the synopsis, as well as some rundown from Sean Levy on what to expect with Deadpool 3. And then next up, and this one is a little bit more tied in with the Super Bowl tomorrow, Deadpool 3, allegedly, there is a blurry screen grab out there, and if it is indeed legitimate, which will be confirmed or denied tomorrow when the trailer, because we'll talk about the trailer in a second. Allegedly, the Deadpool 3 movie is going to be titled Deadpool and Friend. So that is allegedly the title of the movie. So that brings us to Super Bowl. So the Super Bowl, allegedly, these are the trailers that are rumored to be airing with or around the Super Bowl. I will say anymore with the cost of Super Bowl ad times, a lot of times what'll happen is they'll put on like a 10 to 15 second teaser for their trailer, and then it'll say like go online to see the full trailer, because the cost of putting a 3-minute trailer on the Super Bowl is astronomical. So I wouldn't expect a lot of full trailers to play with the Super Bowl, but these are the ones that are allegedly going to be released in conjunction with the Super Bowl and maybe have little teasers in the game itself. Deadpool 3, that one we've talked about. I think we even talked about that. I think I talked about that on a previous episode, but it sounds like that's pretty solid that we're going to be getting it. And that's where the screen grab came from, allegedly, is a blurry screen grab of something from the trailer that'll be released tomorrow that says Deadpool and Friends. And it's blurry as hell, but it's pretty obvious that that's what it says. But also we might be seeing a trailer for Kingdom of Planet of the Apes, Knuckles, the Sonic the Hedgehog spin-off movie, I guess. And I believe that is Idris Elba voicing Knuckles. The new Mission Impossible, which I have no idea what the fuck it's called now, because just recently, I think I forgot to mention this on the previous show, but apparently Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 has been retitled to Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, meaning that the next one is apparently not going to be called Part 2. So I don't know what the fuck to call this movie, but the next Mission Impossible movie that is a follow-up to the previous Mission Impossible movie allegedly will be getting a teaser trailer. Allegedly, potentially A Quiet Place Day 1 as well as potentially Wicked, the long gestating film based off the Broadway musical that basically takes the viewpoint of the quote unquote Wicked Witch of the West and shows how she is not indeed wicked, but is a lovable character. That's been on Broadway for 10-15 years now, and I feel like it's been in development for movie wise for 6 or 7 years. I've been doing the thing where I, list out my movies I want to see for the next year, and Wicked has showed up on my list for the last 3 or 4 years, where it's listed as, it's coming out in 2020, 2019, 2021, 2022. Sounds like it might actually be coming out next or this year, I think. So the trailer is potentially dropping with the Super Bowl, as well as the final one on the list. At least the one, I mean, there's maybe some other ones, but the ones that I was mostly interested in is Twisters, the sequel, follow-up, whatever, to the original movie Twister. May potentially also be getting a trailer release with the Super Bowl tomorrow. So next up, we've got a fun one from Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan basically saying that the Robert Downey Jr. casting as Iron Man is one of the most consequential castings ever. So I got to quote the actual full quote here. He says, with anybody you work with actors, you're looking for some kind of connection emotionally, empathetically, Nolan said about being drawn to Downey. He goes on, quote, you're looking for some kind of generosity. He has this incredible generosity of spirit. It means that when he's in a scene with other people, he's making sure that they're all doing their best and that they're all able to bring their best to the table. He helps them clarify those emotional connections. Then he goes on and says, I've always wanted to work with him. I've always seen that in his work, Nolan added. And because he had such a charisma as Tony Stark, him playing, then he goes on here and says, him playing Iron Man is one of the most consequential casting decisions that's ever been made in the history of the movie business. I want to give him the opportunity to lose himself in a part, lose himself in another human being, the way great actors love him. So that's an amazing thing to say for Christopher Nolan. And it honestly, I mean, there's some people that kind of wonder, like, if that had gone a different way and, you didn't have someone as because, I mean, obviously Robert Downey Jr. was not a star at the time. He was kind of on the low end of his career after some bad decisions. He was playing, minor roles in not so great movies around the time that he got cast in Iron Man. But obviously, he's elevated Iron Man. Iron Man has elevated him, and he's now a top star in Hollywood. He's nominated for an Oscar right now for supporting actor for Oppenheimer. And I just think that, there are some people that wonder, like, does the MCU look like it does today if you didn't have that symbiotic relationship with Robert Downey Jr. and Iron Man? And basically, because Iron Man was the first movie of the MCU, that, if not for the amazing performance of Robert Downey Jr. that basically hurled us into the realm of the MCU, that maybe the MCU would still exist, but would it be at the same level it is today if not for that magic of Robert Downey Jr. in the role of Tony Stark? So very interesting conversation for sure. And Mike says Brando is Don Corleone, a close second. Yeah, that's a huge one too. I mean, I'm a fucking longtime Godfather fan. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember if we've ever talked Godfather on here or not. I know if we haven't, we certainly will. And even if we have, we will again at some point, because Godfather is one of my all-time favorite film franchises. And yeah, Marlon Brando in there is pretty incredible. And that was actually, I don't think that the studios fought Robert Downey Jr. a lot, but I do know they fought Marlon Brando a lot. He was obviously known as one of the best actors alive at the time, but he was being seen as box office poison at the time, as well as that he was difficult to work with. So Francis Ford Coppola had to fight a lot with studios over a lot of shit. The biggest fight was Al Pacino. They did not like Al Pacino. They didn't want him in the role, but they were very, very, very much against Marlon Brando as well. They didn't fight him as hard as they did for Al Pacino. That is why in the second movie, at that scene at the very end, when it's the Don coming home to a birthday surprise, you never actually see him on screen, because Brando felt so disrespected on the first movie that he refused to come back for the second movie, even for a small 5-minute scene. So great call though, Mike, for sure. Brando's a huge one too. And I do love that Nolan didn't say it is the most consequential. He just said one of the most consequential, because of course when you're talking in film stuff like that, to say the most consequential would be a very, very bold claim, because that's basically saying that nothing in the history of film is more consequential than that, and that would be a tough one to argue, I think, for any argument. So I always love when you cage it a little bit more when you just say one of the most, because that gives you a little bit of wiggle room, and also gives other people that have other arguments the room to coexist with you. And then the last two here are actually somewhat serendipitous to the topic today. And the first one here is Ethan Coen. He has a new film coming soon, and he has cast 3 people in it. The movie is titled Honey Don't, and it is going to be starring Chris Evans as a cult leader. Robert Downey Jr. is the last article. So Chris Evans is a cult leader. Margaret Qualley is a private investigator, and Aubrey Plaza, the amazing Aubrey Plaza, is playing a woman of mystery. So yeah, I don't know. It's apparently a comedy, which doesn't mean much for the Coen Brothers, because I feel like even with comedies, they can do some pretty crazy shit. And this is not the Coens. This is one of the Coens. They have, unfortunately, I don't want to say they haven't broken up, but I think they've split and gone on to do their own things for a while. So this is just a Ethan Coen movie, though. But I love the idea of Chris Evans as a cult leader. That will mean that 2 of the 3 big main Marvel actors will have played cult leaders, because we had Chris Hemsworth playing a cult leader in The Bad Times at the El Royale, which is the second time we've mentioned that movie today. Wonderful movie. At some point, I'll maybe have to do an episode on that movie. But he played a cult leader in that. Chris Evans is playing one here. So now we just need to see Robert Downey Jr. playing a cult leader at some point, and we will have the trinity of Marvel all playing cult leaders in other movies. And then the last one here is equally exciting, and maybe even more exciting, because the Coen Brothers are reuniting. That is not a thing to... let's just go ahead and... So they are reuniting. They've been apart doing their own projects for a couple years now. I believe the Ballad of Buster Scruggs is the last thing that they did together, that if I have that right. And that's been a minute now. But they are coming back together. But not only that, but they are coming back together for a horror movie. So Mike, it's exactly what I had prepped too.
Just hook it to my veins!
Coen Brothers back together and then doing a fucking horror movie. Incredible. And we have a quote from Ethan Coen, and he says, quote, "It's a pure horror film, and it gets very bloody. If you like blood simple, I think you'll enjoy it." So, yes, I am, yes, I'm going to do Mr. Gumble again, because...
Just hook it to my veins!
I mean, come on, man. That's just absolutely incredible. And that does... transition us to, let's see, I got the right, okay, to the main topic, which is the Coen Brothers. I just want to riff on the Coen Brothers for a bit. They're incredible. So I will admit, I have not seen every Coen Brothers movie. I actually even own a couple that I have either not seen since I was so young that I almost don't count it. That is Raising Arizona. I remember seeing that one maybe in I think I was in grade school, seeing it on cable or something, and it didn't, not much stuck with me over the years. I probably wasn't the right movie to watch at that age and really get anything from it, but I do own it. I'm going to watch it at some point. And then I also have Miller's Crossing, which is another one of their movies that's pretty well regarded that I bought in the last couple years, but I've yet to watch. But so the Coen Brothers, they're legendary. They've done all kinds of great stuff. But for me, they began, the Coen Brothers, for me, my first exposure to them outside of watching Raising Arizona on cable as a young kid and not really getting much from it. The first one that they ultimately, oh man, I'm going to not make a comment about Xi Jinping. I need to put something in the chat so I can get around this stupid reaction thing. Let's see, and then get rid of this bot, which I'm pretty sure it is. Let's see, there we go. Yeah, I'm not gonna make a comment about a certain honey-loving bear in association with Xi Jinping. Although I'm probably already said enough stuff on social media over the years that if I ever ended up in China, I'd probably end up in a prison anyway. So the first Coen Brothers movie that I ever really saw that actually had an impact on me that I remember was actually in high school. It was a English teacher, which was a very cool English teacher, because we were doing Homer's Odyssey, or is it the Iliad? God, I think it's Odyssey. And we did a whole thing on that, read the Odyssey and all that kind of stuff. And then he actually brought in and let us watch the movie "O Brother, Where Art Thou." So not their earliest movie by any means, but the first one that I saw, and this movie absolutely blew me away. I mean, I didn't know who the Coen brothers were at that point. I was a movie fan, but like, I don't know. I certainly know way more. Even 4 years later, as I was a few years out of high school, I knew way more about movies than I did in high school, even though I loved movies. All I knew is this movie blew me away. George Clooney, I still think it's his finest role he's ever done. I just have recently been watching ER and stuff, and he showed up. Obviously, that's where he kind of made it big, and that was kind of cool to see him in there. But still, to me, I see George Clooney, and I think "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou." This movie as well. I'll talk about it a little bit more, but the larger thing I want to talk about is this movie is so influential because it pretty much brought bluegrass music from kind of an obscure, sub cut of country, and it really put it on the map. I mean, it made bluegrass more popular than it's been in 100 years, probably not 100 years, but probably at least 50, 60 years before, that bluegrass was it was as big as it was after "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou." I remember even in my first few jobs out of high school, just seeing like this boom of bluegrass. There was new age bluegrass, there was all this stuff, but so much of it was a reaction to the soundtrack of "Our Brother, Where Art Thou," which was so heavily bluegrass, and that suddenly all these people that went and saw this movie were exposed to a music type that they had just never really been into before, and suddenly they were. And I think to this day, like the place that bluegrass has in the larger musical scene, I think owes a lot to this movie "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou." But yes, it is indeed a telling of the Homer's Odyssey, which I think is an interesting one if you have ever seen it and didn't know that it was. But once you know that, or you read the Odyssey and then you go back and rewatch this movie, everything down to John Goodman, a Coen Brothers regular. He is a one-eyed Bible salesman that beats them up and robs them. Of course, they're in the Odyssey. There is a Cyclops that they run afoul, and that he is indeed the Cyclops. There are sirens that seduce and turn someone into a toad, or so they think. This movie's just incredible. I mean, John Turturro is an absolute legend. Just recently in the last couple of years, he did like the Batman, he's done other Coen Brothers stuff too. But for me, I always think of him as Pete from "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou," and then of course Tim Blake Nelson played Delmar. There's just a great cast in this movie. They're going on this adventure, and it's just one of the most quotable movies. In fact, I don't know if I thought I had it close at hand. I guess not. I thought I had it right there on my cart. I actually got a gift of a real pomade tin that it's been cleaned out and stuff, but it was actually made in response to this movie, and it's a Dapper Dan pomade can, and it's all cleaned out shit. My goal, I actually think I'm gonna go and hang it up on this wall because of the pomade can. You could just kind of like hammer a nail through it into the wall, or drill, or I could probably do something that isn't destructive to it, but then you just pop the lid back on and it would just be kind of wall hung. But Dapper Dan, just this movie is so quotable, it's so funny. George Clooney again at his best. There's just a lot of great actors, a lot of cool stuff in this movie, and like I said, I didn't necessarily like connect that like, oh, this is a Coen Brothers movie. I was just like, oh, this is a really fucking cool movie based on Homer's Odyssey that a high school teacher let me watch, and I of course bought the soundtrack. I've listened to it a million times. Still put "Man of Constant Sorrows" on random playlists and stuff. In fact, it came up on Peter and I's playlist when we drove to Vegas for the It Escape Room. But yeah, it's one that I love this movie. I still quote it fairly regularly. The Coen Brothers are very good at quotable movies. So that was my first experience with them. And then in terms of like in order, I really don't know. but I do believe the next one was probably No Country for Old Men. I don't necessarily have to go in order, but I'm just kind of thinking of how the timeline for me would have worked out. Yeah, so we talked let's see, No Country for Old Men, or no, Oh Brother Art Thou. But let me just go back up to the list, kind of more in order of the release, even though that's not the order I saw them in. So of course Fargo is a wonderful movie. It's having kind of a resurgence as they now have a TV show on FX or whoever that's doing Fargo, kind of a tribute show. I don't think the Coens are involved in it, but the movie itself is pretty iconic and incredible. Steve Buscemi. Of course, I think Fargo. That's the TV show. You always have like those movies that have like a moment. William H. Macy, which to me, I'll always call him the shoveler because Mystery Men is one of the greatest movies ever made. And William H. Macy, that's where he begins and ends for me for a lot. I mean, he's obviously done a lot of wonderful stuff. I'm not gonna say ends, but that's where he begins for me, and he'll always be the shoveler to me. But Francis McDormand, Steve Buscemi, just a lot of great people in this one. This one you have the iconic Minnesota thing, so you got kind of the Minnesota accent and all that kind of stuff. But I think there's those movies that have like the certain scenes. I think you can't talk American History X without people talking about the curb stomp. And I think in that same way, Fargo, you can't talk about Fargo without the wood chipper scene, which just came up on the little IMDb thing. It's like, I don't know if it's a trailer, but it's showing like random splatterings, and right as I said that, it showed the guy with the wood chipper. So Fargo is wonderful. And then Mike mentions the Big Lebowski and Shut Up Donnie. The funny thing is I do believe there's a fan theory that it's because of how if you watch them in order, because in Fargo, Steve Buscemi's character never fucking shuts up, and then in the Big Lebowski, his character hardly talks, but the way he's talked to by John Goodman's character is he's constantly telling him to shut up, and there's people that like to connect those things and say he was such a loudmouth in Fargo that the whole movie of Big Lebowski he's getting yelled at to shut the fuck up, and that he's out of his element and all that fun stuff. So Fargo I am getting a little bit hazy on, just because it's probably been 10-ish years since I've watched it. I do need to throw it back in. I think I just got upgraded it to Blu-ray not too long ago, so I need to throw this back in. I'm guessing this show has been really good so far in the 27 episodes we've done of inspiring me to doing stuff. Again, I don't think I'd be watching Battlestar Galactica if not for the conversation a couple episodes ago. I had to wait until I finished a few things before I started it, but ultimately this show is primarily the reason I've done that. And I do kind of wonder if I meant to watch a couple of these Coen Brother movies before getting to this episode. It just didn't work out with life and shit. So ultimately though, I do kind of wonder if after this I'll be kind of jonesed up to go and actually rewatch some of these, especially the ones either I haven't seen that I own, like Miller's Crossing or Raising Arizona, which I haven't really seen, just on cable when I was like fucking 10 years old or something like that. But even some of these ones that I have seen but I haven't seen in a while, like Fargo's a little bit more hazy to me. I haven't watched The Ballad of Buster Scruggs since it came out. I've only seen Hail Caesar once. Yeah, so I just wonder if this will cause me to spark me to go into watching more. So then in the order of the movies that I've put on my list to talk about, is next up, of course, is The Big Lebowski, which Mike mentioned in the chat. Love The Big Lebowski. Again, I was in college. Perfect timing. Shut Up, Donnie. This movie, I mean, and the other thing, I'm going to pause, and it kind of works for The Big Lebowski, but it works for some of their other stuff too. But I'm going to pause and say the Coen Brothers are so fucking unique to me, because I don't think there's another, and I can't say filmmaker because there's two of them. There is no other creative force outside of the Coen Brothers that I have this experience with, which is I'll watch a movie and I'll think it's kind of, I don't want to say mid, because I don't think that but it just feels like very oh, okay, 6 or 7 out of 10, it's not bad, not like the greatest movie ever made, but it's not bad. But then I'll rewatch it and it'll move from a 6 out of 10 to a 7 out of 10 or a 7 to an 8. And then I'll be like, oh God, this is good. And then I'll watch it again and it'll move up to a 9. And it just, I feel like no filmmaker that I've experienced, and that doesn't mean there's not other filmmakers I haven't really experienced, benefit more from rewatches than the Coen Brothers. And The Big Lebowski is an example of that. I remember the first time watching it. I know it was a cult classic. I knew kind of its reputation. I knew a couple lines from it because you can't be in society without hearing stuff. But I remember throwing it on, watching it the first time, and then when it was over, I was like, yeah, there was a couple laughs, but like, that is not that good. It isn't as good as people are making it out to be. Not that it was bad, but it's like, it's not like this fucking like, oh my god, world beating movie that people make it out to be. And I was just like, all right, whatever. But then like, it was months later, I just remember there's a couple things from it that were just in my mind, and I'm like, you know what, fuck this, I'm throwing it back on, I'm gonna watch it again. And I just fucking died. And then every time I watch it since, I feel like I love it more. And it's one of those movies I can throw on any fucking time and watch. It is so good. There's so many quotable lines from it. I mean, of course, you can't, I told Peter when we were setting this show up, we actually had our names, hearts set on a different title for the show. And then, I went through and found, because, the hard thing about naming a podcast is there's a million fucking podcasts that exist. Not only that, but there's a million fucking podcasts that have existed, that don't exist anymore, but they've used the name. And I think it's kind of like bands. I've talked to friends where I'm like, man, how easy it would have been to have been made a band in the 60s or 70s where you can just be like, oh, we're the Who, or we're the Rolling Stones, or we're Kiss. Like, there's all these like basic fucking names that you can just use, and then that's you. Now that's your band. And it's like, today though, in like 2024, how fucking hard would it be to do a band? Because it's like, not only do you have 50, 60 years of bands that have, or 60, 70 something years worth of bands that have existed now. But also in the age of the internet, now you've got to worry about self-published artists. You got to worry about people that have SoundClouds. You got to work, cause you've got to have like whatever. So, and I think podcasts are the same way, there's a lot less time, but it's like, I feel like in this short period of time that podcasts have existed, there's been a million people have tried things. And we found one title that we both really loved. And I was actually going and registering stuff, and I think I even own the email, the web address, all this kind of stuff. But then when I went to register the Instagram, I found a Instagram existed already, and I was heartbroken. And I went and looked, and it was like, they actually looked like they were on their way out. They were basically saying our final episode's coming up, but then we waited and waited. I mean, we started this show in February, so we're just about the 1 year mark. I forgot to grab the actual debut of this episode. I need to get that put on the calendar. We may be either right around, or we might be just past our 1 year anniversary for this show. But then we actually probably held off for like a month or so, waiting to see if they would just post their final episode. Because there was one thought of me that was like, once they post their final episode, we'd probably be good to use it. And then finally this title hit me, and I was just like, you know what, to fuck with that title, I don't even care. This is the right title, because I loved the idea, and it wasn't even The Big Lebowski, although I'm getting to that in a second, is what I told Peter, is I love the idea, we're both dudes in our, mid to late 30s, we're still geeks, like this whole idea that, oh, you'll grow out of this, like these fandoms or whatever eventually, but it's like, no, you won't. Like, if you're like really into a fandom, it is going to continue on and continue existing, abiding essentially. And so I love the idea of geekery, geekery being a thing we all are a part of and love and enjoy, but geekery that it abides, it continues, it goes on even into your late 30s or 40s, whatever. Like, we're not in an age anymore where, you hold these fandoms to like, oh, that's only for children. No, now we all understand, like, fandoms are forever. Like, don't feel shame about your fandoms. Just live with them, like, embrace them. And so I told him, I'm like, Geekery Bites, I think I love the just the general idea behind it and stuff. And I don't remember if he brought it up or if I brought it up, but I'm like, I guarantee you though that everyone's gonna think it's a Big Lebowski reference. I'm like, that it really isn't. It more came down to, I just landed on the idea of like geekery, and that it just continues on. And then when like the abides hit, it just clicked. But then immediately, even me, I knew it instantly. I'm like, well, that's a fucking Big Lebowski thing though, like the dude abides. And so I feel like our show title, it's going to always be attached to the Big Lebowski, even though ultimately and truthfully and honestly, even if it were a Big Lebowski reference, I would not at all have shame in that. I would own it. But I'm being 100% truthful. It didn't. It was just independent. But immediately after I came up with the name and realized it's a killer fucking name, I mean, the first thing I did is looked it up everywhere to make sure it didn't exist anywhere else. And then once I realized it had never been used before, then I told Peter, he loved it. And then, of course, we had the conversation, though, that, of course, The Big Lebowski is going to be considered and thought of with our name because the dude abides. Mike, look at that. Mike looked it up. Episode 1 was 2/11/23. So tomorrow is the 1 year anniversary. Awesome, Mike. Thank you. I guess I could have done that. It's always tough on a one man show though to start looking things up too heavily. But that's awesome. So tomorrow is the 1 year anniversary of Geekery Abides. That is awesome. I'm gonna have to add that to my calendar. That I have it on my the Dark Tower one on my calendar too, just so I don't lose track. I mean, now it's been enough years with that it's like kind of stuck in my memory, like early October. Sometimes I have to look to see the exact date, but I kind of know it's like the very beginning of October. And with this one though, I just need to get that pounded into my brain. But it's really cool. We're actually only a day off from it. So thank you, Mike. Mike said happy anniversary. So that's awesome. But all that aside, The Big Lebowski is probably, I don't think it's the first movie of theirs though that I had this effect though, or again, I watched it, thought, it's all right, 6 out of 10 or so. But then every time I watch it, it's more and more to the point, I think this is one of those few movies I can throw on any time and just watch. And it's so funny, and I reference it all the time, maybe a little bit subtly, so like anyone other than big fans wouldn't necessarily get it, because there's so many great lines in it. It's so good. Mike said earlier, it came out when he was in college, so it's perfect timing. Yeah, and for me, I mean, I came to it probably in the last decade or so, seeing it for the first time, and then more importantly, the second and the third, and on, because it's just an incredible movie. I mean, Walter is one of my all-time favorite characters. I know he's a shithead, and I don't think that he's like one that you should aspire to by any means, but he's just so goddamn funny. The nihilists, just, I don't know, the freaking ferret. I mean, I had a pet ferret as a kid, so the ferret, when he goes into when the nihilists come into the apartment with the ferret and he calls it a marmot, I fucking love that. I think for like a year or two there, not too long ago, in the last couple of years, I was making a joke of every time I saw any small furry creature, including dogs, I would tell them nice marmot. And then I mean you've got Sam Elliott with his small part. Of course the amazing Philip Seymour Hoffman does a great job in there as well. Just the actors across the board are incredible, or wonderful. This movie is so goddamn quotable, and it is so funny. I mean, of course, Julianne Moore, a wonderful national treasure to all of us. She does a great job in it. Also, another iconic thing from this is largely before this movie came out, a White Russian was considered a girly drink that most men would never allow themselves to be seen drinking, because that's a girl's drink. But The Big Lebowski has turned that on its head entirely, and now it is the ultimate bro drink. I'm not saying that derisively, but I'm saying that a lot of dudes would feel very happy with going to a bar and ordering a White Russian and drinking a White Russian because The Big Lebowski. So this movie has left its mark on society, and it's absolutely incredible. I mean, to this day, I'm blanking on his name right now, the main actor, because I always just call him the dude. The Big Lebowski. I don't want The Big Bang Theory, god damn it. Jeff Bridges, Mike, thank you. So Jeff Bridges, I just call him the dude. Like, Peter can attest to this. He hadn't even seen it before. But when we saw, he hadn't seen The Big Lebowski at the time, but when we saw Iron Man in the early days, I'm like, man, how undude of him in this movie. Because he's just like this, like, corporate, like, square, but then he ends up being a villain, and it's just so undoodly. But yeah, this movie just infinitely quotable. I think the thing that really got me the first time that maybe made me not like it as much is I was trying too hard to follow the actual plot. And I think when you watch it on rewatch, though, you kind of understand what the movie is. So you don't really give a fuck. You're just watching all this shit happen. But I'm just one that likes to track movies too much. And I just think that, like, the randomness and weirdness of this movie just kind of maybe drug it down for me a tiny bit. So then on rewatches and stuff, I was able to just, like, absolutely fucking just dive into it and enjoy the fuck out of it. John Turturro, I mentioned him as Pete from O Brother Where Art Thou, but him as Jesus is one of the most obscene film roles outside of probably a John Waters movie. He's like when he and the dude are washing or cleaning their balls with that little ball washer thing, the little ball rags. It's just it's fucking obscene, but it's so funny. This movie is so incredible. I mean, the music in it's incredible. But yeah, John Goodman, he's probably the MVP of the movie, although Jeff Bridges and everyone does a wonderful job. Of course, we can't go without.
Good night, sweet prince.
That has, of course, been in the Geekery Abides arsenal since day one. But I don't know if we have any other Big Lebowski sound bites. I don't think we do. No, we don't. That's just the only one that's really. No, we have.
You're not wrong, Walter. You're just an asshole.
The picture was too dark. I couldn't make it out exactly. So we have a couple things that have been involved here because ultimately I did tell Peter, even though our show title wasn't inspired by the Big Lebowski, I said I'm not going to avoid the Big Lebowski by any means. So when we were thinking of some of the sound bites, both of those came to mind. I thought immediately of the Walter line because I'm like, I knew we'd be covering news, so we're going to have to cover actors that pass away, and then this one here was more for Peter because he says this to me all the time.
You're not wrong, Walter. You're just an asshole.
That's one that Peter has said to me a great number of times because I am often making points that maybe you're a little bit assholey to make, but they're not really untrue. So Peter loves when I do those because he wants to argue against me, but he knows he can't. So he'll usually just throw that line at me. So yeah, I love the Big Lebowski, though. Just one of my favorites. There's a few people at work that know I love the movie, so it feels like, they don't really know me otherwise. They're just kind of just someone you see once or twice, maybe once a day. And it just seems like every time we run into each other where there's like a second to talk, they'll always just bring up the Big Lebowski because they love it. And there's one guy that hit in his little department, and he's got a little calendar on the wall, and one year it was a Big Lebowski calendar. So I made it a point every month to go and see what the new calendar was for the year. And so he kind of realized that I was a Big Lebowski fan, and so now every time I see him around work, it's always a Big Lebowski conversation, which is fine by me. Hashtag Peter is wrong, Mike says. Oh man. Yeah, so that's Fargo, Big Lebowski. We got Our Brother Art Thou, and that does bring us to No Country for Old Men. This is another example of the Big Lebowski thing, though, where when I first saw this one, I think I was like, this is like a 6.5, 7 out of 10, kind of in there. But then every single time I rewatched it again, it just was like, to this point now, I would almost say it's damn near a 10 out of 10 movie for me. It's one of the greatest movies ever made, in my opinion. It's just a wonderful movie, but it's so different. And I know it's based off a Cormac McCarthy thing, but it's just so like, there's a character that's fairly important that dies, but he dies off screen, and you only come upon him, and it's like, I feel like the first time you're watching, you're like, wait, that can't be who I think it is. Like he's a big character. There's no way that he would have just fucking died off screen, and no, he did. This movie, it just blew me away. I mean, I think I went and saw it in theaters there in 2007. And it's incredible. Now my IMDb showing me what you may also like, and No Country for Old Men is coming up. So of course, Tommy Lee Jones, Josh Brolin, and Javier Bardem with a fucking absolute world-beating role as Anton Chigurh. Woody Harrelson's awesome in this movie as well. Stephen Root is a wonderful dude in this movie. Just there's great lines in this, but there's also just the suspense. There's just so much with this movie. The story being told. I mean, the scene with Anton Chigurh and the freaking the guy at the gas station is one of the most insane fucking scenes I've ever seen. Like, I've seen it a million times, and I still cannot watch it without just like, I can't breathe. Like, you hold your breath the whole time because it's just like, what the fuck is going on with this scene? This whole movie is so incredibly well done, just well shot, well written. And I've never really delved into Cormac McCarthy, but this would be high on my list just because I've loved this movie so much that I would adore to read the book that came from this. But it's such a great movie, and it's just it's very bleak, very it's one of my, but I call this like a neo-western, and I think this is probably one of my favorite neo-westerns of all time. Mike says, I know how my steaks stop walking thanks to this movie. Or how my walking steaks. Yeah, how steaks are. Yeah, with the freaking bolt gun thing, which is one of the most incredible film prop choices of all time. Because it's just so fucking like. I don't know how to explain it. It's just like we're so used to guns, which are loud and whatever. This isn't. This is just like a quiet, like an air canister thing. And it is truthfully how they kill cows in a lot of settings nowadays. And it's just like to see this guy carrying this around. He also has that suppressed shotgun, which is incredible. There's the one scene where Llewellyn, is in the hotel room, and he's looking at the door, and I'm getting chills just thinking about it. And he's looking at the door, and then like you see some feet walk, and they stop in front of his door, and then they walk away. And there's like a light out in the hallway, so you can see all this happening. And then the light goes out. And then he uses the bolt thing to knock out the door's lock, and it shoots and hits Llewellyn. It's just the tension in that scene is absolutely fucking unreal. And then he gets out of the room, and like the hotel itself is like dark windows, you can't really see anything, and then suddenly you just see like this shotgun blast coming out of one of the windows at him as he's down on the street trying to get away. Just the way this movie is executed is so incredible. And I think that the only people I've ever talked to that don't like it don't get it, and I don't mean that in like a pretentious way, but it's just like, the whole premise of like what the title of the movie is, No Country for Old Men. I think a lot of people don't realize that Tommy Lee Jones is the main character, and everything about this is about him and him coming to this place where he no longer understands the world that he is supposed to be a law enforcement officer in. And of course there's the whole idea that at the very end, when he goes into the room, to investigate, the Anton Chigurh is actually in the room, and it's like he makes a choice. Does he either engage with him, and it isn't shot in a way that makes it overt that he like thinks that he might be in there. But earlier on, you saw Anton Chigurh that basically asked someone, are you gonna kill? Or the guy asked me, are you gonna kill me? He's like, it depends. Did you see me? And then Tommy Lee Jones's character chooses to just walk out of the room and not investigate any further, and it's like that is kind of him choosing that like his life is more important than the job type thing. It's just a brilliant movie. I know I'm not giving it credit, doing it its full credit, but it's such an incredible movie. Mike says, what's the most you've ever lost in a coin toss? Yeah, that scene alone, I mean, and I it's funny, I've seen a number of people that have never seen the movie, but they've seen that scene like on YouTube and stuff, because it's unreal. And I'm again on the IMDb, and that's the scene that just came up on the little trailer. It's just, I feel bad for that guy. And there's just a lot of like subtle things in the movie. There's people that debate whether he kills the wife at the end. I believe 100% he does, because there's been a few times in the movie where he either took his shoes off, or he's very cognizant of his shoes getting blood on them. And when he walks out of the house of the wife, you see him look at his boots very closely and wipe them on the ground. So I do believe 100% that Anton Chigurh killed Carla. So this is a wonderful movie though, and the idea of the randomness too at the very end, as I'm talking about, then Anton Chigurh gets hit by a car. He's in a car as well, so it's a car accident, but it's just so random. The whole idea is, that it isn't shit doesn't just work out. There's randomness that comes that, whatever. And I mean, that's the whole premise, right? Is Llewellyn finds, because of random chance, finds a bunch of money, and it drags him into this whole cartel thing. So wonderful movie. One of my absolute favorites. And the next one that I have on my list to talk about is True Grit. And I remember when this one was announced, I remember just saying, like, I don't know how the fuck you remake a John Wayne movie. Like, who the hell are you going to put in John Wayne's role? And I remember, like, kind of being against it until I heard, by this point I was cognizant, probably because of No Country for Old Men. I think that's when I really discovered who the Coen Brothers were, and then I retroactively went back and went, oh shit, they did Oh Brother Art Thou, and oh, they did The Big Lebowski, and whatever. So I think that's really when I really became cognizant in 2007 of like the Coen Brothers. So when they finally announced that the Coen Brothers were the ones doing the True Grit remake, I'm like, fuck, I'm there. I don't care. I'm gonna go see this movie. And then, of course, they ended up casting the dude as the Duke. which is a pretty good pick in my opinion. I always True Grit. I didn't watch a shitload, but I watched the original one a bit as a kid. John Wayne was fine, but I always hated the little girl in the original. She went on to be the mom in Halloween 6, and she gets killed by Michael Myers out in the sheets, which is always slightly fun because she annoyed me so much as a child in the original True Grit that going and watching her as an adult actor being butchered by Michael Myers was fun. But Jeff Bridges playing Rooster Cogburn. To this day, Haley Steinfeld playing Maddie Ross. I think it's one of the greatest travesties in the history of the Oscars that she was. I can't remember if she wasn't nominated. I don't even think she was nominated for Best Female Actor, but I mean, not only was she not nominated, but I think she absolutely should have won. I don't think there was a single actor, male or female, that year that did a better job than she did because she was a child. She's like 14. And she's playing in a Coen Brothers movie against actors like Josh Brolin, Matt Damon, Jeff Bridges. God, who else? There's some other people in this movie. They're not showing at the top of the list here, but I thought there was. But either way, you got some fucking powerhouse actors in this movie, and I just feel like with a young actor, it'd be so easy to just get kind of lost and overlooked and whatever. But she just didn't. She held her own, and I think she fucking dominated the movie in her role. And I think to this day, yeah, it's a fucking shame that she didn't win an Oscar for her role as Maddie. But this movie, it's one of my favorite westerns. I don't remember, we did top 10 westerns way back. I was looking at it recently. We did it back in June, and I believe True Grit made my list. I don't have the list readily at hand, but I do believe that True Grit was on my top 10 because it is one of my all-time favorite westerns. Great acting by everyone involved, and it's just such a great shot movie. I mean, the Coens make such beautiful movies. There's the scene when he's riding out with Maddie after she's been bit by the rattlesnake, and you see him just driving the horse to the point of death, and there's one point where you get this really wide shot with the fucking, just the entire fucking galaxy of stars above them, and it's just so stunningly shot that it just takes your breath away. The dude playing Rooster Cogburn just absolutely killed it, and it was the perfect choice. Again, I remember that when I first heard it announced, I was, before even the Coen Brothers were announced, or at least before I heard that it was the Coen Brothers, I was like, well, who the fuck do you put to replace John Wayne? Like, you can't replace John Wayne. Like, that's like one of those impossible roles you're asking someone to step into. When I heard it was Coen's, then I heard it was Jeff Bridges. I was just like, that's perfect. The Duke turns into the dude, and he'll do wonderful, and he absolutely did. I really loved True Grit a lot. I think it absolutely blew away the first one for me. I know that's hard to compare, but I think the Coens really killed it with the movie. And then the one I bought this one, which is Hail Caesar, kind of a tribute to like old school Hollywood type stuff. And this one came out in 2016. I missed it. I think I only bought it in the last year, or probably the last 2 years. And I think I only watched it about a year ago. But it's got Josh Brolin, George Clooney, Alden Ehrenreich, maybe I actually bought it around the time of Solo in 2018, because I think Alden Ehrenreich, it's when he was cast as Solo that I was like, what else has he all been in? And I was like, oh, he's been in the Coen movies. Let me buy that. Ray Fiennes, Scarlett Johansson, Tilda Swinton, great. I mean, Channing Tatum, Frances McDormand, Jonah Hill. This is a stacked movie, and it's about just old school 1950s Hollywood, and it's just a great movie. It's just got that style and pizzazz of the Coen Brothers. I've only seen it the one time, so I can't really speak to it as deeply as The Big Lebowski or True Grit or No Country for Old Men. But I did really enjoy the movie, and I do want to dive in and watch it again because I love that old school Hollywood. Just those old days when the fucking studios were just a bunch of dudes that it wasn't corporations and all this shit. It was just like film people. They were people that grew up in that business and they ended up in charge, or they built their own studios, and they were film people. Like it wasn't, you didn't have to have all these like intermediaries to help explain to a bunch of bean counters in some godless, faceless organization. It was actual film people that were like, yeah, let's do it. I could see where you're going with this, and whatever. It's just a cool thing, and like just that era, the way things look and feel and stuff. It was an awesome movie. And then, of course, the last one I have on my list, which is the last one that they did together, which is The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. This one was on Netflix, I believe. And it was kind of an interesting one because it's a movie, but it feels like it was a series because it's a movie, but it's like, God, I always think like Simpsons Treehouse of Horror, where you've got like the 3 episodes. It's got multiple stories being told that aren't really connected. And they're all just wonderful, every one of them. I mean, there's the memes where it's the what's his name that's about to be hung, and he asking the guy next to him, "Oh, it's your first time, huh?" You got Tim Blake Nelson, that was again Delmar from Oh Brother Where Art Thou. You've got Clancy Brown, Danny McCarthy. I mean, there's just people all over this movie. One of my favorites is the one where you have the gold prospector going out and doing his thing. Like, there's just a bunch of small stories, and every one of them are so well done. And I remember after this, I'm like, man, True Grit, and then this, like, just keep making fucking westerns, Coens. Like, you guys are killing it. But I mean, yeah. And then even Oh Brother Art Thou, that's in the 1930s, so you can't really call that a western, but it kind of feels like a western in some ways too. But yeah, they do a great job they did a great job with this one. I believe it was on Netflix. I wonder if this one's ever been released on disc. This is one I definitely would love to have in my collection, because it was wonderfully well done. I've only seen it the one time, but let's see what the thing says. Set against the backdrop of 19th century post-Civil War, where life is cruel and cheap. The stories of 6 different people, so I guess there's 6 stories, not 3. Untitled, or United by Death, unfold, starring the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, cheerful Buster Scruggs, which is Delmar from Oh Brother Where Art Thou, and he's like a gunslinger and stuff. Yeah, so there's a bunch of different stories, but all of them are just so good. And I feel like this came out right around the time of Red Dead Redemption 2, so it all just felt very Western at that time. You have this great Western game, you have this another wonderful Coen Brothers Western. Highly recommended to anyone. But those are the main ones I had to talk about. I love the Coen Brothers, though, and I really do need to dig deeper into them. I have a spreadsheet where I track all the movies that I own, and I'm getting to a spot where obviously my movie collection, my shelves are limited in space, so I got to be careful. I also like to only buy movies I kind of want to buy. Like, there's other people that collect hard media that for them it's all about quantity over quality. They just if there's a disc in the Walmart $5 bin that I've never seen the movie, or I've even seen it and I don't like it, but I just need to get my count up. I need to get more movies and stuff. I'm not that way. For me, shelf space limited, so if a movie's in my collection, it's there because I want it to be, or it's a blind buy, and even if down the road, if I end up not liking it, I'll end up getting rid of it. But I need to buy more. But one thing I've thought about doing is targeting specific filmmakers. And I think I put on I built out a list of Steven Spielberg, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I know he's not a director, but actor-wise, and the Coen Brothers are the 3 that I kind of picked to target. I think that's where I bought like Miller Crossing, and then Raising Arizona, which are 2 of the ones I've owned of them that I haven't watched yet, because like ultimately I want to start becoming kind of a completionist on certain filmmakers and actors. And the short one on the very, very short list of people that I began with was, again, Steven Spielberg, one of the greatest directors of all time, the Coen Brothers, Arnold Schwarzenegger, George Lucas wasn't on there because I think I own everything that he's done already, including THX and American Graffiti and Red Tails and all, everything. So I decided to, he's a little bit easier because he hasn't done as much as like Spielberg and stuff. But yeah, Coen's, I need to rewatch some stuff that I've only seen once, watch all the stuff I haven't seen before, as well as buy up and watch shit that I have never seen before, because they are incredible. They do a wonderful job. Their dialogue to me is some of the best. The other thing I wanted to point out too is I feel like there's no filmmaker that I know that does better than them the idea of looking like the real world, if that makes any sense. I don't want to sound like crass with this, because I think some people hear this and they think like, you can't say this without being a dick, but I feel like they don't strictly stick to good looking actors, and I don't mean that like the people they cast are ugly, but I think their films feel more real, because it's not every person in their film is not George Clooney, drop dead, 10 out of 10 looker, film star, but they got guys like Stephen Root that is more of a character actor. Buster Scruggs had some people where they've just got like, massive wrinkles, scars. Like, I just feel like they cast people that look like real fucking people, and it's so refreshing, because so often in like any film it's like, oh well, here's a background character, but look at her, you can tell that she's like some 20-year-old drop dead bombshell fucking girl that wants to hit it big, and she just got this walk on background role. but she just looks like, and it's like, oh, well, we're set in this like small town library, and it's like, okay, does every person in this small town look like an A-list actor in terms of looks wise? Because that's the way the casting makes it look. But I think the Coen brothers go against that, and they just really get very unique people that look very unique, and just gives you a very wide variety of looks. And again, I don't even mean to say ugly, but they just don't have that traditional Hollywood look for all of their characters. And I really appreciate that. I mean, even George Clooney and like Oh Brother Where Art Thou, like he's so dirty and dingy and whatever in that movie that I don't know that they're necessarily giving him his best. Like they're not dolling him up like some of the other movies he did in the early 2000s. So I really appreciate that about them, because I think it gives you more of a reality in their movies. I think because it's like the real world, right? Like as you move around through life, like there's just a lot of different kind of people that look different kind of ways and speak differently, and I think their dialogue is incredible. And I think there was one, I don't remember who the actor was or what movie it was about, but they actually talked about, they saw a line that was written in a certain way, and they're just like, well, that's not correct, that's not how you'd say that. So the person corrected it, and then the Coens like cut and stuff, and they went and approached him. They're like, what are you doing? And he's like, said the line. They're like, that's not how it's written. He's like, yeah, but it's written like, and it wasn't backwards like Yoda, but it just was written very whatever. And they're like, we wrote it that way for a reason. And it was just like, don't ad lib, read what's on the script. And I appreciate that, because their fucking dialogue is so goddamn witty. I mean, how many of these movies did I even talk about? I'm talking about a fraction of their movies, but how many of them did I say are just infinitely quotable? And there's a reason for that. They are wonderful writers. So that's awesome. Mike in the chat says, a challenge to you then is to watch all the movies you have that are still in the original cellophane. Picking that up from Peter. Actually, Peter's deriding me on that mostly went away a couple years ago, because I found an app, rather than trying to track everything on a spreadsheet. I found an app where you can actually scan the barcodes, and with that, I think it was not this last Christmas and New Year's, but the one before was the first year I used that app. And so you use your phone and you just hold your camera up to the barcode, and it scans it. And I will say that when I've got my light on full blast here, the cellophane is usually so reflective that it makes it hard for your phone to get it. So most of the movies now are actually opened. But I will take your challenge though, that my goal will be, is to for sure watch Raising Arizona and Miller's Crossing, which are the two I own, as well as I want to add more Coen Brothers. I don't know if I'll be able to complete their entire filmography this year in terms of purchasing them. Maybe I could, but I will try to add as many as possible and watch as many as possible, because they're just one of my favorites. Like I said, they're just great. Fargo, I do need to rewatch Fargo though. I feel like criminal that I don't remember as much about that as I should, because that's a great movie, and I haven't watched the show yet. People have recommended it to me, but I certainly would never watch the show without rewatching the movie, so that was fresh in my mind going into it. Go watch The Shoveler, be a cop in Minnesota, don't you know? So yeah, that's the Coen Brothers. It's definitely fun to talk about, just dive through someone's filmography a bit, at least from my perspective. I know there's a shitload of stuff that they've done that I didn't talk about, but if I haven't seen them, I can't really talk about it. But I did want to geek out on them a bit. I guarantee you there'll be more Coen Brothers conversations, maybe like a deeper dive into a movie like The Big Lebowski or something like that in the future. But I just wanted to do like a 10,000 foot view of them as an overall filmmakers and just geek out on them for a bit, because they are wonderful. And it was so serendipitous too that we had to delay the last episode because there was so much news, and delay this Coen Brothers conversation to this episode. But then in the course of the last 2 weeks, that Ethan Coen casting news, and then the news about them reuniting for a horror movie, both broke in the last 2 weeks. So it allowed me to report news that happened to coincide with the main topic, which is really fun. It always makes me happy when that kind of works out that way. So Coens are awesome. Highly recommend stuff. At some point, what I should maybe do is I did cut tier lists out of this episode, just because with all the news, because there was a shitload of news in this episode today too. I was like, my God, man, what is with all the news? Like, is it just because they got clogged up with all the strikes, and now it's all just fucking flowing like crazy because the dam broke? But I was like, even if it takes going long, I'm gonna make sure I discuss the Coens this time, and I'm glad to have covered everything news wise, but also to talk about the Coen Brothers. But yeah, so let me go ahead and hit over to the email address if you want to email the show and reach out. That will be at Tadd, at geekeryabides.com. Email the show. Let me know if I'm right or wrong on something. Let me know your Coen Brothers takes or movies, or if you want to just fucking email me some Big Lebowski lines. It all works. I guess I could have had a White Russian for this episode too. Actually, I don't know. Do I have any? I don't know if I have any Kahlua or not. I think I might have some Kahlua actually. But yeah, I should have had a White Russian with this episode. But yeah, so that is the email address if you want to email the show. And then next time on Geekery Abides, this one was kind of a lightning bolt. I was going into the episode like 2 minutes before I went live. I had another one on the list, and I was just like, God, I mean, it'll be fun to talk about, but is that the right one? And then finally it hit me right before I was about to go live, so I went and changed the slide real quick. And this one is going to be Aliens versus Terminator 2. Not necessarily like going against each other because there's just me. I don't know how I debate myself, but I guess I kind of can debate because ultimately this is one I've always talked about. It's a question for the philosophers that one cannot answer alone, and that is which James Cameron second movie is the best of all time. And I think that brings it down to Aliens versus Terminator 2. Really though, again, I'm only one person. I don't think I could really debate myself, but I will put up the merits and arguments for either one. But I think as part of that, it'll just be geeking out on two of the greatest action sci-fi sequels of all time, Aliens and Terminator 2, James Cameron's two movies. He did the first Terminator, but he did not do the first Alien. That was Ridley Scott, but he did both sequels, Aliens and Terminator 2. I just want to talk about both of those and then kind of compare them, even though I guarantee you right now I will never be able to come to an answer as to which of the two is better, because once again, I leave that to the philosophers, because a man as simple as me would never be able to come up with the answer of which is better between Aliens and Terminator 2. That is an impossible question that no one can answer. At least in my opinion. So that is what we're going to do next time, because we talked about the Burke comic book. I know we talked about, Peter did an interview with me about Terminator overall, but going side by side with Aliens versus Terminator 2 as like a side by side thing, I think that'll be a lot of fun. So Terminator 2 is, of course, my favorite Terminator movie of all time. Aliens is the best Alien movie of all time in my opinion, so it'll be a lot of fun to hit Mr. James Cameron up for two of his greatest movies of all time. So that'll be next time, and I will also say I have penciled next time in for February 24th. Nothing has changed on that. I said at the very beginning of the episode that I, so far, even though I was just barely starting, that the idea of this Saturday night episode versus Friday night and then Saturday morning, but do Saturday morning, break, and then Saturday night, felt really good at the beginning of the episode. Today, or here I am at the end of the episode, I still feel good about it. So I am going to put that in for the 24th for 2 weeks from today, same time, 6:30. I do think this is probably the way I'm going to continue on. The Friday thing just felt a little bit helter-skelter to me. So I think that, 2 o'clock for Dark Tower Palaver Mountain Time, and then 6:30 for that. It gives me a break between the two episodes to have some food, relax a bit. But this feels good. I think this is going to work out. So that'll be the plan for next time, where we talk about Aliens versus Terminator 2. Mike in the chat says, great show as always. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Mike, and thanks for joining me. Thanks for being part of the conversation. It always, I'm certainly glad you're here, Mike, especially, and also the fact that you are a fan of a number of these Big Lebowski, Coen Brothers movies, not just the Big Lebowski, but Coen Brothers movies, because it is always fun to have someone else chiming in and correcting or filling in the blanks, such as what is the name of the dude, because again, I always call him the dude. So Jeff Bridges is a name that slips my mind because he is the dude. He is and always will be the dude to me, even when he is very undoodly, like in Iron Man, the first one. So yeah, thank you for joining. And it'll be next time, again, Aliens, Terminator 2, 2 weeks from now, in a fortnight, as I would normally say. Same time as this, and I think that'll be the standard for at least for the intermediate period. I mean, I don't know long term. Of course, Saturday nights can always be things where sometimes social events come up. I'm going to try to always keep social events to off weeks. But for now, let's keep the flag planted at 6:30 Saturday nights for the Geekery Abides episodes. And then Mike says, LOL, fan of the Coen Brothers and a fan of the Geekery Abides show. Thank you, Mike. It's awesome. Thank you for the support. And I'll sign off as I always do by saying love what you love. To hell with anyone that uses terms like guilty pleasure, because in pop culture, if you have something that brings you pleasure, it should never be guilty. Let your geek flag fly high, and go geek out on something in the next 2 weeks. And until then, geek out, and then I'll see you, and I will geek out with you in a couple weeks on Aliens versus Terminator. See you guys.